2, 1. We are live. We're not live, but we're recording. What's up, family? Welcome to Colonial Outcasts, the sacrilegious abomination that not just your back the blue uncle will hate, but possibly your Zio Karen aunt will hate. And if you have neither of those, count your blessings. Some are not so lucky. So I am here with my co-conspirator in anarchy, Greg Stoker, ex-Army Ranger who served in Afghanistan, turned anti-war, anti-imperialist activist and journalist, and myself, Mark Wayne, ex-Army National Guardsman, E4 shitbag who used to be an evangelical Zionist, who almost joined the IDF in 2005 when I studied in Jerusalem, but fell in love with Palestine instead and eventually turned very anti-Israel. And for the folks who like to listen to stuff, check us out on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast because it does boost us in the algorithm and makes us more popular. And also, we are heavily shadow banned, so if you want to help us out with that, one thing I could suggest is do a screen recording of some of your favorite moments of this podcast and spread that around, disseminate it on TikTok. What is the fucking problem? God, can I not get through an intro?
I mean,
go, Greg. What?
I mean,
God,
no, it's good. I just want to make the comment. It's like a super coked out intro, which, I'm digging.
It's Colonial Outcast. The whole thing's super coked up. We're already far past that, bro. Sorry. So today, we are checking off a huge bucket list item for this podcast and one that I've been looking forward to personally. And that is, of course, talking shite with the original Colonial Outcast, the Irish, the legends who invented the concept of what it means to truly be a Colonial Outcast. Representing all of the Irish people as a monolith, we have Jake from the Shan Vans, an Irish rock band, the Belfast-based Irish-language rock band, blending high-energy sound with a radical political message. Rooted in anti-imperialism and Irish resistance, their music champions decolonization, cultural revival, and the international solidarity. As you can see, Greg is over there cringing out because he's not used to me giving intros, but that's okay. I like causing him to cringe. Jake's writings draws on themes of resistance, decolonization, and cultural memory, influenced by his upbringings in the early 2000s in one of the most politically active communities in Ireland, Ballymurphy. Am I saying that right?
Just about. You butchered my band name, but we'll let you over it.
Okay, sorry about that. I got to get back to my Irish roots personally with the Beach family, not bitch, Beach family. Singing in Irish, Jake blends personal and political narratives, often weaving together themes of decolonization, Irish mythology, radical poetry, and contemporary global struggles. Since debuting in 2023, they performed at major music festivals, including multiple appearances at Ireland's largest music festival, Electric Picnic. Never heard of that one because I don't go to concerts, to be quite honest. That's more of a Greg thing. But I'm going to try to...
Did you go to Coachella?
I've never been to Coachella, never will, and will never go to Stagecoach.
I have a whole story about Coachella. But anyways, sorry, Jake. Mark's trying to get through this massive intro about yourself that you have to listen to because apparently...
unlike your massive intros, unlike your massive academic posturing intros. Okay, fine. Fuck it. What do you want to say, Greg?
No. It was just the bio for Jake that went on so long.
That's how you. I'm sorry. A lot
of like 5 sentences max.
I felt a bit honored, to be honest, Greg. I felt pretty. My head was getting big.
All right. Well, I guess I'll just shut the fuck up then.
No, I actually agree. Now,
yeah, you could do that now and then. You know that it's not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. Just try it now and then, Greg. So released last month, their third and latest single, the Shan Vans, a powerful anti-genocide anthem, forms the centerpiece of Unite Against Genocide, their Ireland-Palestine solidarity project, which involved over 100 artists and contributors worldwide. And between 24th of February to March 5th, you were in Palestine. And I want to know more about that. But first, hey, bro, it's great to have you on here. It's an honor to have my favorite audience base, which is the Irish, of course, of Colonial Outcast. I don't think we're worthy enough for that type of viewership, but hey, we'll take it. So, Jake, what do you got, man? How was Palestine?
It was fucking heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. Completely heartbreaking and inspirational in equal measures, to be honest. There was, I think we met something like upwards of 15 different groups across the 10 days we were there. So it was very good meeting those groups, hearing their stories, but it made me feel guilty as fuck because we're just not doing enough here in the West, in our white privilege, in Europe, in America. We're not doing enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. What areas of Palestine did you go to? Like, walk us through your journey upon landing, and then what villages you got to go see, and what sections of the apartheid you were able to get a good glimpse of.
Yeah, sweet. We went in through Jordan, so I think anybody getting in through Tel Aviv is kind of fucked now. The day that we actually arrived in Jordan, there was a famous European parliamentary politician from Ireland called Lynn Boylan, who was deported on the same day from Tel Aviv. So I think anyone who's trying to go, go through Jordan, it's a lot safer. On the way through Jordan, we got to see the Bedouin people in the hills of East Jordan.
Wadi Rum?
Say that again.
Was it Wadi Rum?
No, we literally got a bus tour from the airport to the hotel, and from the hotel to the border crossing. And on the way to the border crossing, you're literally coming down several kilometers, and we got to see like nomadic indigenous fucking Bedouin people still living the old way, and it was just a wee bit of an insight into, that's the way a lot of the world is. People are still living these traditional lifestyles, indigenous lifestyles, and they should be protected and blah blah blah. But coming in through the border was intimidating. Everything was sweet until we got to the Israeli checkpoint and at the border, and there was a random spot check done on what happened to be the only fucking Palestinian traveling with. Well, there was two Palestinians traveling with us, and one of them got randomly spot checked on the border at Jordan. So that sort of delayed us for maybe an hour at the border, and that was our first experience of the apartheid. 20 of us in the delegation, 19 of us get through, and the only person to get grabbed was, someone of Palestinian descent.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was a good start to the trip. So then we come through the border crossing, and they've got a big giant Star of David etched into the mountainside. Like when you're really fucking I don't know, insecure about your identity, you like to stick symbols of your identity everywhere just so that everyone knows that that's who you are and that's what represents you. So we got through, and that was the case. There's a giant Star of David on the mountainside. And then leaving the border on the West Bank side, we're met with fucking giant Israeli settlements all around the hills. So that was our introduction, and it was just echoes right back that colonization is about land. It's about stealing land.
And I just wanted to point out that, we've talked to people who didn't actually, American citizens who didn't make it to the border crossing. Josephine Gilbo, a former U.S. Army intelligence officer, got stopped by the IDF and turned around and banned from Palestine for 5 years. So I'm glad you made it through, though.
Yeah, me too.
We made it through. We only made it. I just want to reiterate, we only made it through because we were traveling with a group of English and British delegates as well, who were largely white, actually. And when the IDF did actually get on our bus, they done being lazy bastards and unprofessional fucks that they are. They only sort of checked the first couple of passports, and they sort of looked up at the back of the bus, seen more white people, and I'm assuming that they assumed that we were British also, but we had Irish passports, which was a bit risky. But the only way around that was to capitulate and to get a fucking British passport, which I can do given the status of the partition part of my island that I live on. But fuck that as well. So we just brought the Irish passports and get in. And
is that pretty risky? Like you said, it's risky to bring an Irish passport, so that goes to show that the Irish are not welcome.
No, we kicked the ambassador out last year of the south of Ireland. So we literally kicked her out. She's no longer welcome and has an office here. So that's why the retaliatory strike on the European Irish parliamentarian was done. But basically, so we made a little bit of a joke out of it because the crack. The British have been putting the Irish and the Africans and everybody to the front line for fucking centuries. So that was our chance to put the Brits to the front line of the bus and BR coverage. Nice. And they were only too happy to facilitate that. The people from Britain were absolutely amazing. The majority of them.
I like how you brought in an ancient beef into this issue in modern day. Well, I want to go back to what's interesting is like your journey across the border and hanging out the Bedouins. That reflects my exact footpath over there as well. The Bedouins in Jordan, they had a huge impact on me. I went to Wadi Rum, and what was interesting is at that time I was in Wadi Rum, spending the night with the Bedouins out there in the desert. I was a Zionist, and I was with my Sephardic Jewish Zionist friend who was from New Jersey. He was very brown. He could pass off as a Persian and an Arab. He was very much Arab looking. And what's funny was when we would cross the border, the Israeli border guards would flirt with me so hard, and they would be completely racist towards him, thinking he was an Arab, and give him shit, even though he was the Jewish guy and I was the non-Jew. And it was just interesting to watch his shock as a Jewish person to be like, dude, why are they so racist? I don't get it. I'm like, and then eventually I was like, brother, are you not seeing it yet? Why are you so confused? They're racist. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish, it's your skin color. And so it was just funny to watch him go through those moments within Israel where elderly Israeli women would be looking at him suspiciously, and he'd be like, Makura, like what's your problem in Hebrew? So anyways, but crossing that border, once you crossed in and you noticed after you got through the passport situation, what was like your first impression upon entering into the Palestinian territories?
It was just a sense of excitement and curiosity, and I mean, I've watched so many things over the years of journalists getting into the West Bank, and so I was kind of not shocked by the image of the landscape, but what did shock me was the just how big and how much more developed all of the Israeli settlements are in relation comparatively to the indigenous people who live there, their own infrastructure. It was fucking, I suppose, it was not shocking to see what we seen, but it was definitely regards looking at those settlements, it was intimidating, and there was a real sense of, right now we're actually through the what we thought was going to be the difficult part turned out to be the easy part, getting through the border. The difficult part was trying to come to terms with just how blatant the apartheid is, just how blatant the segregation still is. And we come from a city here in Belfast where I'm segregated. I grew up on a street in Ballymurphy, which is like adjacent to a community called Highfield, and there's a giant army training camp between my housing estate and that housing estate, which is people who would be descended from settlers who came here a few hundred years ago. And just to see that sort of system again, it was I felt a connection, and I also felt a bit of culture shock as well.
Yeah, the connection that the Irish have with Palestinians has been such, I guess, a redemption for us white people in some type of ways, because it's to see Ireland being like the one country in the whole European Union and that whole region, being the only one standing up, I believe has, as small as it is, as small as Ireland is, and they don't have a huge military, it still sent so much of a shockwave into that region of the world that I feel like it's led the charge. And I feel like it inspired a lot of people within the European countries to kind of like, hey, the Irish have normalized white people standing up for indigenous rights. And like they've always have, like going back to 1169 with the first rebellion against colonialism. Do you feel like that legacy of rebelling against colonialism is growing, or do you feel like there's do you feel like here in the United States you have like our Fox News and who likes to apologize for colonialism? Do you see that type of sentiment growing in conservative circles in Ireland?
Yeah, massively. I mean, look at that absolute buckethead, Conor McGregor, being wheeled out by Trump and being wheeled out by, I think it was Tucker Carlson there a few weeks ago.
Yeah, just for context, because I know a lot of our audience won't watch MMA, but Conor McGregor is an incredibly problematic UFC fighter who has copped a couple sexual assault charges. And of course, that's why he was brought in front of the White House to, speak about like Ireland. And
birds
now
of a feather.
Yeah, birds of a feather. Absolutely. Isn't he running for president or something?
He tried to, and you have to get like, a certain quota of senators, people already within the Irish institution to to back your plea for the presidency, and 0 people backed them. 0 in history. That has never happened, I don't think. So that's just a vindication of why fascism in Ireland, although there's loads of examples throughout history of fascists in Ireland, because obviously it's been colonized and there's settler colonial residual fuckery still happening. And I suppose with our history of resistance that goes back, I mean, how long have you got and how long do you want to go back? But we have, I believe, always been sort of, wee bit like the French resistance, that wee bit more radical than the rest of Europe. And I think that's, I think we now have a huge responsibility, not just Irish people, but I'm talking about white people in general, particularly those who are aware of colonialism, who are versed in how to speak about it with other white people, should be doing everything we can to raise those types of conversations. Because it's simple. Colonialism happens everywhere. It did happen to white people also.
We get colonized as well by the entire system.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like a colonization of the mind. And we just, I suppose what one thing we'll say is, if the Irish hadn't have been white, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So there's a huge degree of privilege in that. And when I say white people got colonized also, there's very specific examples of that. But generally, when we talk about slavery and colonization, Ireland is quite unique in that last sort of maybe 400 or 500 year period where we have, actively been talking about colonization in our resistance music and our folklore and our poetry and that. So that's where I think we're distinguished from the rest of Europe. But also, I would throw Scotland in with that. I would throw Wales in with that. It's just a completely different set of circumstances in Ireland, because in my view, and in the view of many others, we're still colonized. Our island is partitioned. We don't have unity, and it's only a matter of time. But the creeping hand of fascism is, it's reaching into the side of sort of private taxi men sort of contingent. When I say that, middle-aged, maybe single men around, even in the radical pockets in West Belfast, when I get into taxis with some of them, they're talking about Trump. They're talking about immigration. I know they don't give a fuck about immigration. They just want someone to hate. And they're being guided by fascists on YouTube. And thank God there's podcasts like this that just correct the narrative. And you're also, people from Ireland might listen to a lot quicker because, again, of the color of our skin.
Yeah, I think Dublin is the 4th biggest listening city of this particular podcast. I just wanted to make one. I just want to make one point about what you said about how the British dealt with white people. I've often held, having studied in my post-colonial studies, basically focused on the British Raj in India, and then thinking about the American Revolution. It's like, dude, they just weren't willing to do the same things that they were willing to do in like Kenya or India, to put down dissent, because in the colonies they had like third cousins who were American citizens or American colonists. So yeah, I generally think that the only way the American Revolution went down the way it did is because of that privilege.
Yeah.
Hot take.
Love it. I agree as well. And I think it's kind of like it's a point to be made, but it's not one to be labored and dwelled upon. Basically, we have more ability to reach out wider than people who are ethnically different from white people, and that's because of the way that the institutional racism around the media and access. But this is why, fuck, I mean, like YouTube and social media, it's a double-edged sword. It's a Pandora's box of absolute chaos, but it's also creating spaces like this. Like, I don't know how the fuck I'm sitting here talking to you, Greg. I actually started watching your activism like months and months and months ago, and never thought that there would be space for something like this to happen. So it's class that people who are aligned across large vast of land, scales of land, who are aligned ideologically, are now finding spaces. Because back in the day, I mean, you had to write, Karl Marx and Engels exchanged fucking thousands of letters across decades. So we're talking like instant access here. So that's what's class about it.
I just real quick before we move on to like one of like Mark's whole thrust of the interview. Sorry, I was just hoping for the audience if you could kind of explain why, in as condensed way as possible, Ireland's partitioned. I don't think a lot of people understand
I was
what
gonna ask
Northern
that.
Ireland and
I'm not a
whatever
I'm not a historian, so people are welcome to challenge and to fucking correct me if I'm wrong here. But generally speaking, Ireland was colonized in the it was there was an invitation given to a Norman lord, I believe, as Richard de Clare Strongbow. You mentioned 1169 earlier on, so just as a starting point, that's a good date. But subsequently, since that date, there's been relatively frequent attempts to colonize Ireland. There was a number of failed colonization projects in the south of Ireland, and then eventually in 1690, you have King Billy. I'm sure you know William of Orange. King Billy, as he's known here colloquially, he arrived in Ireland to fight King James essentially, and through that sort of effort had began to colonize the north of Ireland, which then became sort of the central focus of British colonization in Ireland. I'm sure you have heard "beyond the pale" as an expression. Generally. Yeah, so just generally speaking, Dublin was colonized, and it was colonized by Vikings and Normans and British and fucking everybody. And that was known as the Pale, and anything beyond the Pale was wild and indigenous. But the north of Ireland, particularly what's known as the province of Ulster, there was an attempted colonization of the entire province, which began in the 1690s, and which then carried through one of the most successful projects of colonization in European history, leading to the ultimate decimation of our language, where now we have less than 1% of the island who speak Irish. That colonial linguicide, coupled with land expropriation, forced transfers, forced famines, and architect famines, which were basically without becoming an investigator that has an eye that can go back 150 years. Basically, the famines in Ireland were exacerbated by the fact that the British policy in Ireland was to export any viable food from the island to the Raj, to the colonies, while Irish people died on the corner of the street eating grass off the side of the road. And so you've got a whole process of laws that take place, from the penal laws and the Kilkenny statutes that go back further than the penal laws, and right up to the modern annexation, I suppose Ireland was taken into the United Kingdom in 1801 and an act of union. That was following a rebellion in 1798. So from 1801 to 1916, you've got a sort of a resentment and a revisiting of Irish of tactics, in terms of revolutionary tactics, and you have the introduction of dynamite, and then the Irish start to perfect their revolutionary craft, and that leads to a number of revolutions in the 1800s. That's then exacerbated by the famine in the mid 1800s.
But do you condemn Hamas though? Do you condemn Hamas for the? Do you condemn them?
Did Greg say make it as short as possible?
No. But do you? But do you condemn them for using dynamite though? I mean, I get that they were starving to death, but I mean, I feel like dynamite is just barbaric, bro. You know what I mean? I don't know. Yeah. I just
car bombs are bad, but weaponized famine is okay.
Yeah, that's kind of the angle we're going for here, and effectively, you've got all of the colonial tactics which are exported around the world. They're perfected here in Ireland first, so we were the guinea pigs for colonial testing. Eventually, what you have then is a revolution in 1916, and then that leads to most of the island becoming independent from Britain, but there being a remainder of the colony in the north, which became known as Northern Ireland, a term which we reject because it is the colonial name for the state that we now live in. So I don't know if you want to cut that down, Greg, and chop it up a bit, but essentially that's it. We went through hundreds of years of brutal removal of our self-esteem as a people, and when we found that self-esteem again after the 1798 Revolution, which was a revolution which involved Catholics and Protestants and dissenters coming together to kick the Brits out, led by Wolfe, a famous Presbyterian from Dublin, a lawyer who wrote an argument on behalf of Irish Catholics. And that set in train then, along with the American Revolution and the French Revolutions, an attempted revolution in Ireland, which failed because of the fucking weather, of all things. But effectively what we have then is a reigniting of Irish consciousness in the 1800s, which the famine plays a massive body blow to in the mid-1800s, but which the setting up of the GAA, the Gaelic Athletic Association, and Conradh na Gaeilge, the Gaelic League, in the 1880s and 1890s, these two institutions become the cultural institutions which lead us to the 1916 revolution, and then we have the partition of Ireland, which shortly follows that. So that's in a snapshot and a snap way.
Real quick, and thank you for that, because a lot of our audience, to go through Irish history of rebellion it's a landmark for Colonial Outcasts. We should have done this a year ago, so thank you for that. But I want to go back to a point about the partition and the dynamics between the Protestants and Catholics. That's very confusing. Can you please explain the dynamics between those two groups in regards to kicking out the British, the Irish, the Protestants and Catholics?
Yes, so you have obviously Ireland being a largely Catholic, if not exclusively Catholic country, colonized by Christians in the year 500. And from then, there's a sort of a golden age of Irish Enlightenment happening at the same time that there's a dark ages happening in Britain. That's because the Romans never actually got to Ireland. They sort of stopped at Hadrian's Wall. So Ireland's sort of like ruminating and fomenting its culture, but it's in the context of what was called Celtic Christianity. So the legacy of Christians in Ireland goes back well before, obviously, Roman Catholicism, and then you've got the introduction of Roman Catholicism around Europe. That makes its way to Ireland. Ireland is a huge, I suppose, contingent for the Roman Catholics in terms of, of an island full of Roman Catholics, basically. And then through the colonization post 1691 by our good friend King Billy, who tries to turn Ireland Protestant, essentially. So he's basically kicking people out of their homes with an ultimatum, essentially: either turn Protestant or we kick you out of your land. There's loads and loads of class folklore related to Belfast, which is connected back to families who were kicked out of North Antrim. I'm in a county called Antrim. So in North Antrim, there was a colonisation, obviously as part of the wider colonisation of the north of Ireland, and a lot of people end up living in the hills around Belfast. So there's that's the introduction of Protestantism in the Ireland then after King Billy, and from then, from 1691 to 1790, the British set about trying to punish people who are Catholic and incentivize people to turn Protestant. So lots of people actually switched religions in the 17 and 1800s. But what happens is, as I said, our good friend Wolfe, and there's a class bit of rebel music that's recreated and sang by a band called the Wolfe Tones.
I think everyone's familiar with Come Out You Black and Tans.
Come Out You Black and that's the very one. And we'll get to the black and tan. We haven't even got to the fucking black and tans yet, but that's another connection with Ireland and Palestine. But basically, you get through to the 1780s and 90s when there's fucking European revolutions, American revolutions happening everywhere. And Wolfe and a couple of his mates from Belfast, they head to France, and this is where the idea of the Irish tricolour supposedly comes from. And they canvass the French revolutionaries to support them in their anti-colonial struggles against Britain. But the reason that happens is because Wolfe a Protestant, essentially, and he's in his privilege, just like we're saying. He recognized he had a degree of privilege, although he looked like the natives and so on. He was able to write that really seminal work, which was, I believe, it's like an argument on behalf of Irish Catholics, which just basically points out all of the religious discrimination and says that it has to change. And he basically unites Protestants and Catholics together after 100 years of intense colonization in the north, and he holds a series of rebellions around Ireland, and he's eventually captured. But that is a legacy of, when the British came and settled, here. They didn't, and I don't even like the term settled. It sounds like you're going on a fucking trip to your granny's house and sitting on her sofa or something. But so when the British came here and colonized the place, they basically fucked off again, and they had a whole phenomenon called absentee landlordism, and basically they all went back and lived in England, and some of them stayed, but largely they left it to the militias and the Protestant settlers to run the place, which you can tell looking at Israel what happens when you let settlers run anything. And essentially, you've a message coming out of that rebellion in 1798, which just basically says if Protestants and Catholics actually put aside their religious differences and realize that they're all victims of colonization, then the likelihood of being able to challenge it is like increased magnificently. And that's kind of where then there's a real effort in the 1800s to begin separating the two religions again. And there's then the famine largely, if not exclusively, targets Irish Catholics. And that, during the 1800s, we had a similar population to Spain. Don't know what Spain's current population is now, but we're the only country in Europe to be still below the population threshold that we were at in the 1800s. Something like 7 million people in Ireland now. There was 8 million people in Ireland in the 1800s. That's fucked up. So we're the only country not to have recovered, and that's pretty unique and pretty fucking devastating to say out loud, because I've never actually said it out loud. But that's basically that's it. That's the reason that partition happens is, there's a largely exclusively Catholic or nationalist or Republican rebellion in 1916, because by the time the World War I finishes, there's enough of a separation between Catholics and Protestants, at least politically and in the mainstream politics, that the Irish rebellion is largely led by Roman Catholics and people who would identify as socialist and secular maybe. And then so since the partition of Ireland, the North, the occupation in the North has just spent 80 years under an apartheid regime right up to 1998, separating us through jobs, through discrimination essentially. And that's where then you have the modern war from 1969 onwards, because again, Protestants and Catholics were coming together and saying there's discrimination here, it's researched, it is vouched for, why is it happening? So we need to stop it. And then their peaceful pleas for equality are battened into the ground, and the IRA, provisional IRA, emerge out of that as the guerrilla leaders of the nationalist Republican community. So,
a question about the IRA: what was the dynamics within the IRA about Catholics and Protestants? Were there a lot of were they working together in the guerrilla warfare against the occupation?
Mark, would you just repeat that again? My earphone.
No, it's all good. A question about the IRA, like the internal dynamics between Catholics and Protestants within the IRA, as far as unity and solidarity against the occupation.
Well, by the time the IRA, the IRA has its roots back in the 1800s, but from the IRB, but the modern IRA, the provisional IRA, which was the guerrilla group that came from the 1972 split of the Republican movement, decided to wage, a military campaign in Ireland first and then in Britain. But basically, you've got, virtually a very low subscription level of Protestants in the IRA by that time, because if you can understand, from the 1921 partition of Ireland onwards, there's a concerted effort in the North to marginalize and externalize the very large minority Catholic population which exists, and that's then there's basically no real affinity between being Protestant and being Irish. You're British in Ireland, and that's continued to today. But basically, I mean, it is all very much a smokescreen as well. Religion's being used as a justification for colonization. Religion is being used then in the installation of a certain group of people into a certain land, and those people have to be different from the natives. So there was once a time when Protestants and Catholics worked very closely together. That has been decimated by the creation of the partition state, and the state in the North can be characterized by one of the leaders of the state his sort of terminology was a Protestant state for a Protestant people. So imagine being a Catholic growing up in that place. So there's not a lot of examples. There are some examples, but there's not a lot of examples of that unity between the two religions in the modern war. But we would like to go back just a wee bit further and look at, leaders within Orangeism. Orangeism is the political ideology, the bedrock of Protestant colonization of Ireland. It's an institution that's set up to, basically be the equivalent of what I would say the KKK, and it's exclusively Protestant. It's violent, although it doesn't proclaim to be violent. It's got its fingers in all of the necessary colonial pies. But what you see, it was a great example of, if you don't mind me just doing one more and then we'll move on. But there's a guy called Richard Rutledge Kane. And Richard Rutledge Kane is the Grand Master of the Orange Lodge of Belfast at the turn of the last century. But he's also a member of the Gaelic League. So this is before World War One. He's a member of the Gaelic League, and he's also a member of the Orange Order, which is very, very strange because now the Orange Order would be completely against the Irish language and Irish culture, so to speak. And he's actually a wee glimpse into the true history of Ireland, where Protestants and Catholics were actually not as separated as the British institution would have people believe. And on his grave, which is in West Belfast, where I live, it says, "Here lies Richard Rutledge Kane, Grand Master of the Orange Lodge of Belfast. He was a loyal Irish patriot." Now, that would be a mind fuck for most modern Protestants who do not identify with Irishness one single bit.
Yeah.
Not all Protestants, but the Protestant political class.
Yeah. Thanks for that rundown.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys. I'm fucking.
No. It's great.
No, this was a long time coming. This had to happen.
Yeah,
at some point.
And now that we've talked about the internal colonization of Ireland, let's talk about how that colonization affects literally every American citizen who exists in this country. And we can go into the Royal Irish Constabulary and fucking Sir Robert Peel founding the London Metropolitan Police in 1829. I know during the Vietnam backlash in the 60s, everyone's like, why are the police getting so militarized? I was like, motherfucker, they were always militarized. They were literally built. And of course, the London Metropolitan Police served as a template for like the Philadelphia PD, the New York PD, the Boston PD. And, Sir Robert Peel, I think he was, wasn't he like the governor of Northern Ireland for a while?
He was, yeah. And he was in Ireland. The police are known as the Peelers.
Yeah,
that's what we call them, the Peelers, and that's a derivative. Obviously, stems from him. But the Royal Irish Constabulary and the Royal Ulster Constabulary, which were their post-partition, basically in the south, you have the Garda Síochána, which was supposed to mean the guards or the soldiers of freedom. And that's an Irish term. But in the north, you've got basically two major groupings of police. You have the B Specials and you have the Royal Ulster Constabulary, and they are basically the colonial police force here. They actually get rid of the name RUC as part of the peace dividend in 1998. And it got rebranded as the Police Service of Northern Ireland, the PSNI, because there was just so much examples of collusion between the state, the army, the paramilitaries, and the police in the north. So basically you have the Irish minority Catholic population, Republicans and nationalists, and those who are neither of those living under, colonial fucking discrimination, exacerbated in worst areas that they could be, health, education, housing, employment. And you've basically got a fucking a constabulary, a legal colonial police force operating with impunity. And then that is all, pulled out and, it's examined during the peace process in the 90s here. And one of the decisions, in order to have members of Sinn Féin, which are the largest Irish nationalist party on the island, to have them sitting on the likes of policing boards. There had to be some form of capitulation, and that was the rebranding of a colonial police force, which has its roots right back to Mr. Peel, who was a bit of a bastard.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of want to drill down on. Back to my original point, it was like, everyone's like, why are the police so militarized in America? Well, because go back to its roots. It was founded as the UK police, which is like the biggest example of like the imperial boomerang, where colonialism through imperial feedback affects citizens in the imperial core. It's because they wanted to find in the early 1800s a happy medium between calling in the army and the constable and watch system. And of course, armies doing union busting never works out well, so they needed like an intermediary force. And yeah, so Peel founded the UK Metropolitan Police, and he ran it like the North Irish Constabulary. It was militarized from the beginning because they were a counterinsurgency force, and the cops in America are a counterinsurgency force. They're also born out of slave patrols in the Carolinas and the Caribbeans, which were also a counterinsurgency force. But in terms of like the hierarchy and the actual structure, it's more about what came out of the north of Ireland. And, everyone had maintained their military rank. There were veterans of the counterinsurgency in the north of Ireland. And yeah, they used those same tactics, techniques, and procedures on their own citizens. And yeah, and now people bring up like how U.S. cops train with the IDF. The New York Police Department has an office in Tel Aviv. And I'm just like, guys, this has been going on a lot longer, way before the
not to mention the fact that the NYPD has a larger budget than the entire Iranian military.
Yeah, that's what I bring up all the time. Actually, the LAPD also has a bigger budget than the Iranian military. And I was just in LA. They don't do shit.
Well, it's interesting is like when it comes to the United States and law enforcement, our relationship with law enforcement, we had a period during the Obama period. There was a huge push on the right that and a huge paranoia that we were about to enter into a police state. I don't know if you remember the old takes of Alex Jones back in the day. We're headed towards a police state. It's coming under Obama. And then you got all that section of the United States, libertarians and right wingers were all paranoid of a police state coming. And so the government had a problem on its hand. It's like, okay, we have a huge base of the Bible Belt who's very much very much an anti-police state. How do we get them on board with the police state? Because we need them to be on board with the police state in order to accomplish the crackdown from the global elites.
Have the FBI pay country musicians to
do Back the Blue.
You love cops.
So Back the Blue was the perfect psyop to get that section that once upon a time was paranoid about a police state under the rhetoric of people like Alex Jones to be cheering on a police state. And so what I just find the irony in that so like captivating to me.
I believe in two things: outlaw country and the law.
It's insane. It is insane. And that's what America is. You can convince Americans to be down for anything as long as you brand it well with a good marketing team. And so
I would say humans beyond that, Mark.
Yeah.
I think propaganda.
No. Yes, I'm telling you, Americans are more so unique in that.
No, but you know what the problem is? That type of person that you're talking about is now like a universal dweeb all around the world. So you've got that. I mean, the project of American hegemony came along at the worst time possible, when the fucking the influx of media and now digital communication. So you've basically got a hegemonic fucking hold on how media is portrayed, and you've got fucking, I'm telling you now, I've cunts wearing snapbacks. I'm talking about Joe Rogan. I'm talking about Elon Musk. People who are from fucking families whose parents were like in jail like 20 years ago. Like, I'm telling you now, the horse is bolted. And I think what it is now is It's obviously the culture war is the thing that they want to talk about. They don't want to talk about class war. They don't want to talk about colonization. They don't want to talk about anything like that. They want to talk about what you look like and how you sound and where you're from and what blah, blah, blah. But Mark, I agree with the sentiment that maybe Americans are maybe more prone or exposed to it at a wider ratio within your own country. But that particular fragile, uncritical mind, which those messages land on, is fucking everywhere. And if it's in Ireland,
we're talking about the country that literally stopped drinking Corona beers during COVID-19 because it had the word Corona in it. Think about that. That statistic scared me. Dude, and I understand that the alcohol industry took a hit in general, but specifically Corona beers took a huge nosedive because of that name.
It's not especially Americans, man. I lived in India for a while.
India's
in Greece, and dude, it's literally everywhere. Yeah. I think it seems different because, of course, America, because we control, like, as Jake was saying, essentially the airspace. You know, we have the massive culture engine of Hollywood. American industry spearheaded the whole podcast revolution. It seems like we're dumber, but just go to Europe, man. It's the same thing. You like right now.
Yeah, well, I've been to Germany and Austria.
Come to Belfast, come to Dublin. It is the same. It is the same. It's just maybe not as big in Ireland yet because of the cultural bulwark that we have between, and that's again subject to change at a time in the not so distant future, I would imagine. I use the C word. If bastards like Conor McGregor are allowed to have a platform in the sense of a political platform, then that's when you'll see an increase in those types of numbers. But I don't know. I'm also wary that it's just going to happen anyway unless we fucking do some radical shit to stop it, and that's kind of.
There's a global rise in fascism, baby. It transcends borders, nationalities, and cultures. Just look at Modi's government. Like there are like Indian PMs now calling for like the genocide of every Muslim in Kashmir right now. So
yeah. We're trying to keep a close eye on that one with India. But back to what you're talking about, culture. I want to talk about Irish culture for a second. Okay, so the youth in Ireland, the millennials down to Gen Z, down to Gen Alpha, do you see a shift happening where they're going full on anti-colonialism, just given the pro-Palestinian movement enlightening so many people to the subject of colonization that normally was kind of in the back burner of people's mind? Like colonization, a lot of people, at least here in the United States, see it as an ancient thing that happened, and it's done. It's over with. It was a bad history, a little bump in the road.
Did Hillary Clinton say something like, just forget about it? It was 200 years ago, some bullshit like that. I think at APAC, I've definitely seen a clip of her saying
sounds about Democrat. Yeah. So, I mean, it's definitely the attempt to erase the concept of colonization as a modern phenomenon. Is so obvious when you look at mainstream media and in podcasts. But my question for Irish culture, where's the finger on the pulse in Ireland right now? Where are people? What are they thinking right now? Where's the sentiments going? What direction? The momentum?
I mean, I think neoliberalism has fucked the majority of most Western countries to the point where most people are largely apolitical. I believe that there's enough cultural resonance in the story of Irish rebellion and revolution for there to be a larger potential group of people in Ireland willing to start engaging in decolonizing thoughts and conversations and tactics and so on. I think that it has to be placed within the context of decolonization. I mean, I'm an Irish speaker. I was raised by my father raised me with Irish, and I work and I live, about 60% of my life is done through Irish. And that to me is like an act of decolonization. So that alone is having a huge resonance in Ireland right now. A lot of people are starting to question, why do I speak English? Why is the language basically, as Frantz Fanon called, a little cultural treasure? Why is it on the road signs and it's in the museums? But why is it not in the bars and in the back streets and so on? And that so the language in Ireland is sort of being what would you call it? A Trojan horse is what people like to call things. It's a Trojan horse for decolonization, because effectively it's through colonization that we lost our language. Therefore, it's through decolonization that we'll reclaim it. And that's being fucking spearheaded by loads of different cultural movements. I'm pretty sure you have heard of NECAP, or have you? Have you heard of NECAP?
Yeah, they just made a massive controversy Coachella by saying "fuck Israel, free Palestine" on their show.
Yes, that's right. That's why I was asking you earlier on, did you go to Coachella? Because I was going to make that point earlier. But basically, yes, the context of Irish solidarity with Palestine stems from us being actively engaged in decolonization as a people, and that's small groups of dedicated, motivated, largely, I suppose, groups of people who have been largely exposed to that revolutionary narrative within Ireland, and that's people who have family members and who come from communities which were, occupied militarily in recent history. And so I suppose what we have is a very vivid, if not transgenerational memory, as in like one generation ago, but even an active, like I remember the fucking cops in the army in my front garden. I remember the police coming into my community as chauffeurs for the army, coming in their grey Land Rovers, and behind them was the green Land Rovers. I think the only difference in the police army and the army vehicles was the colour, and the army had a hatch on the top, but it was the same Land Rover manufactured in the same company. So to us, the state is a colonial state here in the north of Ireland. And I think what people mightn't know is that in the south of Ireland, it's not as apparent. It's not as in the south of Ireland, lots of people don't understand the colonial context, which is weird, but which is connected to the fact that it was the Conservatives after partition who took control of the island, not the radical Republican Socialists, for example, like those like James Connolly or Padraig Pearse. These were people who were executed in 1916, but the descendants of their ideological positions did not seize control of the Irish government in the south after partition. So again, that's another reason why the south and the north are quite different, but in the context of Palestine, in the context of post-October 7th, we have seen a huge explosion in cross-border cooperation and coordination around, radical tactics. I hope that answers your question, but basically...
It does, and it gives me a lot of hope. In fact, you just made my day, because I've been... I guess maybe I fetishize Ireland a lot in my mind.
You don't say.
Fuck Irish off. People fetishize Ireland. We're the first guilty parties in that fetishization.
As you should, as you fucking should. But St. Patty's Day, as it came up, it got me reflecting on St. Patty's Day and how Americans go out and wear green and shit. And it was the first St. Patty's Day that I was actually kind of pissed off about it. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Like, who gives a fuck if you have Irish heritage? Are you representing the rebellion, the rebellious spirit of Ireland? Are you? If you're not standing with Palestine, take off all the green. In fact, burn all the green clothes in your house.
Okay, St. Patty's Day celebration in America is very problematic, because it's not rooted in any sort of Irish history. It's just rooted
leprechauns
in
and fucking pots of gold and green rivers, Guinness.
Yeah. Also, that Irishmen and Negroes at the time were drunks. So it's St. Patty's Day. You just go out and get fucking hammered. That's of course, the Irish were during the famine fled to America, and they were essentially an indentured servant class.
Yep.
No blacks, no dogs, no Irish.
That's right. There's actually a really great YouTube video. I'll put it in the source list, but there's a video called "The Black Irish of Montserrat," who are basically, you might have seen this, but it's basically, there's a really thick accent in the south of Ireland in a county called Cork, and it's neighbouring county Kerry. County Cork and Kerry. So basically, that if you listen quite closely, the Jamaican, Montserrat, and several other accents in the Caribbean are basically Irish accents, and that's because of the proximity of indentured to chattel slaves in the colonies and on the plantations. But it must be said that we did, again, being white, have a lot more privilege than chattel slaves in those conditions, and we're able to work our way out of slavery, being indentured. But effectively, a lot of the Irish went on to become conservative town judges, policemen, instigators of colonialism in America. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. But there's also great cultural connections between, like, you know, the term hillbillies, you know, that derives from King Billy, that derives from those Puritan Protestants who were even too Puritan for Ireland, who then went off to the New World and ended up in the, I don't know, like the Southern Mountains, Appalachian
hills,
and
they evading the tax man.
That was it. Smart. But I mean, I actually think taxes are all right. Like, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if they didn't go to funding wars and genocide and an increasing police and national security state. Ideally, I think your tax money should go to your own people, but apparently that's too much to fucking ask for.
Social services, baby, all day long.
Yeah. What is it? What is it? Corporate welfare is what we're doing. Is what our tax money's for.
It's Marxism for the rich, isn't it? It's like, it's not what they call it, socialism for the rich. Yanis Varoufakis has kind of championed a lot of that narrative. You know, that there's just so much better at internationalism than socialists. You know, the capitalists, they've took all their learning from Marx, and now I suppose that's what they're doing. Social welfare for the rich.
Yep, and that's kind of what we're looking at. You know, in terms of Ireland, I should probably hit up the Stokers that still live there.
Bram Stoker of all.
Great uncle.
Are you shitting me?
No, I'm not.
You're joking, obviously. Well, Bram Stoker is fucking. You know, there's a great wee story. Again, someone's going to probably come on and say I'm talking shit, but Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, and apparently the word for Dracula comes from the Irish term "druc folla," which means bad blood, and that came from memories of Bram Stoker's either mother or aunt or granny or somebody telling him about what she witnessed during the famine, and apparently it's connected back to when the potato blight hit Europe. Most countries didn't die or emigrate in their millions because their governments weren't colonial psychopaths. But the Irish establishment was exporting the food. So it says earlier on about people dying on the side of the road after eating grass, but actually it was from eating grass because there's no other food. And when you're hungry, you'll eat anything. And then whatever acid and things in the grass not being able to be processed by the human stomach. And then that was regurgitated through black blood, which was then leaked out through the sides of the mouths of victims of starvation and forced famine. And this is where the term druc folla comes from. Now, that may be the biggest bullshit someone ever told me, but it's a great story.
I mean, it sounds great. I haven't heard that. I mean, I've heard other things about Bram Stoker, like he had a very spicy epistolary relationship with the poet Walt Whitman, you know, so he may have been like on that stuff.
Like many other Irish poets. I think
like
W.B. Yeats and I mean, isn't that right? The truly artistic people, will express themselves whatever way they want.
Yeah. So,
by the way, is the Beach family a big name there? The Beach?
Not as far as I never came across the Beach family. No.
Beach, the reason
B-E-E-C-H.
No, just B-E-A-C-H. The Beach family. No.
But so the reason I brought up Ireland in the context of the Stokers is, we're seeing all this drama about deporting citizens to the prison in El Salvador, CICOT, the counterterrorism prison, which is actually not a prison. It's not even a gulag, because if you look at the statistics, 9 out of 10 people actually come out of gulags, but no one ever exists in this. So it's actually a concentration camp. But that's not where political activists will go in the coming police state. They are reopening and expanding Guantanamo Bay, and that's where you'll be disappeared to. So when that starts happening, I might come to Ireland.
Yeah, you'll be more than welcome. Come specifically to West Belfast, because it's kind of like the last republic left in Ireland. Where like basically you'll be safe.
So Greg and I have
come to West Belfast, because that's where I am, and we can go and fuck about.
Okay.
So just to reestablish that. So Greg and I have a free place to stay forever in Ireland. Okay, cool, good.
In this very room I'm working in right now. In this very room, there's 2 fucking shitty mattresses on the floor.
Oh yeah.
I'll sleep in the backyard. I'll bring a tent. Fuck it.
Yeah, I'm down with the crust punk lifestyle, so I don't care. I can bring my own.
Yeah, so fucking cold. You're not sleeping out the back, Mark. Not a chance.
All right, well, hey, you guys keep going. I got a hard out in 2 minutes. So, anyways, Jake, great to meet you. I'm actually going to be in London late May, and then we're going up to like Nottingham and then Hadrian's Wall. But maybe I'll just shoot across the channel. Check out Ireland.
You're like 30 minutes when you're in Scotland. You're 30 minutes from Ireland, so it's it's worth doing. Greg, and if you do, send me those dates and we can hook up, and we can. There's loads of people in Belfast in the Palestine movement who would be kind of honoured to meet you, and the maybe, I know it's a wee bit embarrassing to hear that, but that's just the truth. And
might have to tag on another week then. All right, well, great to meet y'all. I'm signing off. You guys keep going, but yeah, and thanks for listening, y'all. You keep listening, and I'll see you next week.
Slango foil.
All right, peace out, bro. I think it's time for that video that we've spun up, and we can dive into this shit. But before that, what's the relationship with the Dinwiddie family in Ireland as far as being
the who?
The Dinwiddie, the Scottish family, Robert Dinwiddie. They were so my ancestors.
They wouldn't feature prominently in. I suppose I would kind of be versed in general Irish history, and then specifically history of Belfast and Irish language, but they could be huge shouts in Irish history, and I'm just being an ignorant cunt, basically. So,
well, they were definitely huge shits. So my ancestor was Lieutenant Governor Robert Dinwiddie of the Virginia colony. So his unofficial title is Grandfather of the United States, and the reason being is because he was the British governor for the Virginia colony, and he promoted George Washington to general, and kicked off the French and Indian War with the he's basically the archetype of the Native American genocide. So, and he
would have been one of those people who potentially fled Ireland as a Protestant to erase.
No. He was Scottish. A lot
of the settlers. I mean, Ireland was basically majority settled by Protestants from Scotland, Presbyterians from Scotland, and I'm just wondering what his sort of affiliations were in Ireland or in Scotland, So that's interesting. Actually, there's a wee fucking rabbit hole for someone to go down.
It is. At first, he was assigned to govern Bermuda, and then from there he took over the Virginia colony. But he was originally from Glasgow, mercantile family. So there's a reason why we're called Colonial Outcasts for a reason. It's literally in the DNA of me and Greg Stoker. So
through no fault of your own, might I add. It's just happened to be who you. Through no fault of your own, it's just who you are and what you were born into. I think your story gives hope to me that other people, maybe who come from backgrounds like yours and Greg's, who may have been led astray by culture in some way, because that's what happened to us all. Is your story itself is pretty fucking inspirational in the sense of you can come good, you can realize, you can become a critical thinker and see what the fucking crack is, and that's what we should be encouraging as many white people as possible to do. And other colonizers too, Spanish people, Indians, whoever.
Obviously, growing up in a Christian nationalist, not my family necessarily, but growing up in the Bible Belt and knowing my family history as being one of the great colonial families of the East Coast, it gave you a sense of national pride. And of course, you're fed all the doctrine about how our founding fathers were ordained by God. They were consecrated. It was all destiny, manifest destiny.
Destiny, that's the one.
Yeah. So you combine that with fucking Zionism. Like, imagine what an asshole I was when I went to Palestine for the first time. The biggest douchebag you ever met. But I was Palestine's douchebag, and I always tell people that I was the douchebag of Palestine. I wasn't Lawrence of Arabia, the douchebag of Palestine. But it was.
Well, you pissed away all of your opportunities. You could have been a great colonizer. You fucking could have been one of the best.
I could have joined the elite class, man. I know. I fucked that up, that opportunity up. But like, I talk about reversal of and decolonization of the mind. What people need to understand that you're gonna have to go through a depression in order to get through it. It's not for the faint of heart. When I left Palestine, I could not wake up in the morning. I was sleeping in. I didn't want to get a job. I didn't want to go back to school because I was so depressed after doing research into my own empire's history and then learning that all the founding fathers and my ancestors were fucking assholes. So it takes going through depression in order to mature, but you just got to fucking suck it up and quit being a fucking pussy. And do it. You know,
well, that's it. You have to rip off the band-aid. I mean, it is. You have two choices. You can continue to live in blissful ignorance, or you can come out of the cave. And coming out of the cave is fucking pretty difficult. And what we're trying to do, as I suppose, Irish people, as former victims of fucking family heritage like yourself, that we're trying to go back into that cave, you know, and we're trying to fucking illuminate it, and people in there don't want to know because it's, you know, they're comfortable with the fucking bullshit, shadow bullshit that they see everywhere. And I was kind of behind why we wanted to use music, because I mean, I've been involved in Irish-language activism for, you know, a while, and I've been involved in Palestinian activism, but I mean, you know, there's definitely something to be said for using culture as the means to educate. And, you know, there's also responsibility on artists to reflect the times that they live in. And we are living in colonial times, baby.
I always tell people that if we win the culture war, that's the first step. Because the culture war is like a virus. When you can affect people culturally and psychologically, it's like a virus that copies itself. Once something becomes a trend, and people like to downplay culture and focus only on hard power or what the elites are doing. I always say, stop paying attention to who's running things right now and who the elites are. What's important is right here on the ground level. You can't do anything about what Trump is doing. You can't do anything about Bibi Netanyahu. But what you can do, the fucking guy next to you down the road, you can talk to him and enlighten him. And before you know it, that's going to spread like a virus. A virus copies itself. It takes the DNA and RNA, and then it copies itself, and then it can create other copies. Once you do that, it spreads. And before you know it, the elites are surrounded. And the question is, like, are we going to fall for the same identity politics and divisions that has plagued Ireland? And can we use Ireland's example of unity at certain points in Irish history to inspire us to do the same? You know? So I always press the culture war is where it starts, and then it spreads, and eventually it will turn into hard power, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And there's really fucking practical ways you can do that. And it's as simple as showing up at your Palestine event, your local Palestine event. There's a number of groups obviously around the world, BDS movements and so on. And these are the types of places that you want to be going if you want to actually challenge, because we all go through this process of not knowing what the fuck's going on in the world, realizing that something's going on and thinking that you can't do anything about it, and then eventually realizing that something's going on, there are things that you can do about it, and then it's about then how do you tactically approach that third stage of critical consciousness to say, let's build shit, but let's make stuff and let's create stuff and let's be creative in the way that we do it. And I think definitely if Martin Luther King had the internet, might he have been able to get 10 million people to that march, you know, or might, you know, other examples around the world, Gandhi and so on, you know, these peaceful, non-violent movements, anti-colonial movements, would they have garnered a lot more support? Because those people were, those activists and sort of figureheads were operating within the context of a largely controlled media, and we are too. But not to mince my words, we have so much fucking opportunities with these motherfuckers here. These are weapons of mass creation, and we can. It's just whether we can convince enough people. And I think I keep reading this statistic. It keeps popping up. I don't know where it comes from. I need to do a wee bit more reading. But they say you need 3.5% of the world to engage in this movement for it to be totally, monumental in terms of its movement from this type of world to a new world. And that's not a massive number, is it? It's big. Don't get me wrong.
It's not massive, and I think we can overshoot that. I think we can overshoot it. And now here's I've been trying to brainstorm with multiple people about what can make our movement more effective, and I have critique of it. I'm closely associated, let's just put it that way, with the Black Panthers. I love their strategy. I've been learning more and more about the intimate knowledge of what was effective that the Black Panthers did. And one thing the Black Panthers did that I do not see yet in this movement to the extent that I want to see it, giving to the people, giving to the world. So we're asking the world to pay attention to Gaza and the Palestinians. Unfortunately, we live in a world of selfish people who only care if you help them out with something. Black Panthers figured that out. The Black Panthers figured out that, listen, if we want to bring cross-solidarity and cross-sectionalism across the world to bring about equality and bring about power to the people, we have to show them what that looks like. We have to give them a taste of what that looks like. So what the Black Panthers did, they gave them a taste. They opened up the Breakfast for Kids program. They opened up survivalist programs. They opened up free healthcare clinics. What that did was
they also policed their own communities using their amendment. I think it's what is it, the First Amendment, right? To bear arms. They policed.
Second Amendment. Yeah.
Second Amendment. They peacefully policed their communities. Just professionally and with training and with people who were big enough to do it if trouble. And it's just really interesting what you say there. We take a lot of our inspiration. I mean, I mentioned that I've been involved in Irish-language activism, and particularly linked to a place in the Upper Springfield, which is an area in West Belfast, and that organisation's called Glór na Móna. Glór na Móna, which is an Irish term, means the voice of the turf. That's kind of the place that we live. And one of what we done during 2015 to 2017 was at the height of austerity. Our communities being the sort of victims of colonisation in the most recent war in Ireland, the most excluded, the most marginalised, and also the most radically organised community. There was huge social and economic implications for my generation under neoliberalism post the Good Friday Agreement, and that has led to massive amounts of poverty across the places where we live and work. And what we done in response to that was breakfast mornings, totally inspired by the Black Panthers. I mean, I personally was introduced to the Black Panthers through Tupac and the Fini Shakur, and then obviously watching, you've got some references to them in popular culture. You've got fucking Forrest Gump and the scenes in Forrest Gump, and then you've got I think a film that I think it's just called Black Panther. Actually, it's by that black comedian. Can't remember. You know the film I'm talking about from the 90s. So I run a film club in 2014 where Black Panther was one of the films that I showed. And the reason that was done was for exactly what you're saying. It's like, okay, you've interpreted the world. The point is to change it. So we know that all this shit exists. We know the poverty's there. What the fuck do we do? Okay, so we fight back against it. But what does that mean? And then so that's what you're talking about, bottom-up grassroots community development and community building with a bit of a fucking edge, maybe, for the modern age. Could we, I don't know, bring the breakfast clubs back all over the States?
Well, rebellion has to be sustainable. And the only way to make it sustainable is to give to the communities that you are claiming to liberate, and do it now. Don't wait to be like, okay, after we overthrow this current regime and this current elite capitalist class, then we'll take care of you. No, the Black Panthers knew that we have to it's a multi-front war. You have to provide to the people who are currently being oppressed. and currently starving. And not just
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, not just that. You also have to do it to the people that you have to be cross-sectional. You have to start offering free breakfast to not just Black people, but also white people, poor white people, to show them that listen, this identity, this separation between skin color, it's all in the ether. It is completely fictional, and you are just as much a human being. You need food. This Black child needs food. That Mexican child needs food. They need to eat. So by doing that, you're showing other subcultures that listen, this is a thing that's open for everybody. It's not just for Black liberation or for Mexican liberation. It is for also poor white liberation, and that creates that unity that you're looking for.
Absolutely. And that's the decolonizing movement has to be aware of the fact that, in order to be successful, it's going to need to attract people who are formerly from colonial heritage. It's going to have to attract cross class. Actually, it's going to have to attract journalists. It's going to have to attract, middle class, as I say, journalists and celebrities and so on. So basically, I mean, I totally agree with everything you're saying, and I think there's an opportunity here, through, particularly from our context, through music. So our band is currently we're recording Sinnerman, Nina Simone track, Black Liberation, big voice in that movement. She was, and we're basically playing around with that American folk, Irish folk sort of blend, and we're looking at we're going to do a cover of an Irish folk song, and we're going to do a cover of an American folk song, and the reason we're doing that is because we are aware of Huey P. Newton. We're aware of what the Black Panthers were doing. We have tried to emulate that in our communities here already. And you could go on, you could go on and you could watch, just type in Galore Namona Black Panthers, and you'll see that these things are fairly easy to organize. You get a local bakery or a local fucking, chip shop or whatever to donate a few hundred sausages and a few hundred baps, and you go out and you stand at the fucking street corner where the most traffic is coming in terms of young people walking to school, and you hand them free breakfasts on the way to school, and you tell them who you are, and that's it. It's not complicated, it really isn't. And I think you're onto something, and you've arrived at that on your own, and we arrived at that on our own, and that's because it's so fucking obvious that community building has to be part, as music, as film, as everything has to be part of. As
boycotts, as protesting. After you are done with the protest, what the fuck are you going to do? What the fuck are you going to do after that protest? Here's what you got to do. The people that you meet at the goddamn protest, form a squad and start forming flash, what do you call it? Flash pop-up donations for everybody, and then give them a message about Palestine to show them that you're the same system that is making you fucking starve, the same system that the reason why your gas prices are high, that your groceries prices are high, that you're not getting paid enough at your fucking job and you're worked to fucking death. The same system that's doing that is fucking killing kids in Gaza. So and the only way you can get that point across to people is if you fucking give something to them. Give them a bottle of water, give them a fucking sandwich, something to show that you're not just asking people to care about Palestine. You're showing them, first, I'm caring for you, and now I want you to understand. I want you to hear my message about what other people are going through, like you're going through. That's how you reach people. So again, guys, if you go out and protest, make it worth something. Great. Yeah. You put your body out there. You're showing the world that you're standing for Palestine. But now put something to that. Give something to the people in the community around you who doesn't know anything about Palestine, and show them, I care about you. Can you please care about us? Boom. Very fucking simple. And I always tell people that, and one of the biggest things that I hear people talk about in this movement that I completely empathize with is the isolation. And I'm sure the Irish are dealing with it too. Irish is full of passionate, empathetic human beings who are glued to their phones watching this horror show, and they can't stop looking away, and they can't stop feeling isolated. How do we solve that feeling of isolation? Because that feeling of isolation is not sustainable. And my solution to that is just grabbing one stranger that's close to you physically in your community and form a squad, build a squad of 4 people and start strategizing. It will help you with your mental health. It will help you it will help the movement, and it will help the innovation that this movement can do if people start banding together in little war bands, I call them, because it comes from Native American warfare. Native Americans, when they were fighting the colonizers before they were susceptible to the biological warfare waged against them, they would splinter off into war bands. And each person in that war band had a specialty. You had a medicine man who helped with the physical health and the mental health of the people in the squad. You had a strategist, and you had a leader who was in communication with other war bands. Take that model of indigenous resistance and apply it to modern day. I guarantee you this movement will come up with strategies that we never thought was going to be effective. And it will benefit the community.
That's the key point, and that's why everybody listening should really, take that on board, that everybody out there can do something very, very creative and innovative and something that makes an impact and a difference. But I suppose there's this sort of phenomenon of fashionable activism that's linked to that individualistic, sort of atomized, isolated sort of person type fucking mindset. And that's what we're coming into contact with as well in this movement. And I suppose that the antidote to that is community. I mean, this is how do we fight back against isolation? We build communities, and there's a famous expression in Irish Republican history called "build the republic where you stand." So it was a call to people who believed in Republican politics, the freedom from monarchy and the right civil liberties for all, and that. To basically stop fucking expecting some fucking Wizard of Oz to raid in and build it for you, and then you'll go and become a member of it. Go and become the leader of a pack. Go and become a member of a pack. Whatever skill set and level of confidence and tactics you have. I'm talking to gamers. I'm talking to fucking pottery makers. I'm talking to film students. It doesn't matter what your background is. Every human being has a value, and every human being has something that they can give, if not just themselves as a member of that group, and maybe they are getting something out of that in terms of their mental health. And that's definitely something we should be encouraging across the board. And there's also something to be said about, community gardening and things like that. As there's a great example of the People's Garden here, Gardening and Fubble, which is again linked loosely to the area that I live in. And it's doing exactly what you say. It's an intersection of anti-immigration. It's an intersection of anti-immigration, if you get me. So a place where people with different cultures and backgrounds can come and share their fucking techniques around gardening, and that's the methodology and so on. But out of that grows collective consciousness around food, around capitalism, around neoliberalism, and around the ability to use something like a garden as a revolutionary impetus, somewhere from which sparks can flow. And I think the more community gardens, the more people engage with nature, because that's a huge part of reflecting on and becoming back in line with your indigenous heritage, and to respect if, for example, Mark, you're somebody who lives in America, you are the descendant of colonizers, you are, your family history is linked to the colonization and genocide of the local indigenous people, but that doesn't mean that you should live in eternal shame forever. You and people like you who are all around the world, and including people who are maybe from a unionist or Protestant or loyalist background in Ireland, who still don't recognise their Irishness, even though it's totally part of their identity, they should start re-engaging with the land. They should start re-engaging with the language of the land. I mean, I watched a video recently on the colonies in America and how many different languages and how many different, I forget the word that they use. It wasn't tribes. It was, can't remember.
Clans?
No, it was a particular thing linked to Native Americans. But anyway, so basically there was loads of different clans down the West Coast and all of the different languages. And I just think of how much beauty and how much of history is retained within the Irish language. And that's all been lost through colonization. Yeah. But it's there. There are still Native American people who still have knowledge. We're on our way out. Those people are very much on their knees and buried underground at the same time. But there is a responsibility on people like us, like you, to go and find that history and find that name and be curious about it. Because 95% of the place names in Ireland are are derived from the Irish language. So if you're a member of, you know, a community in Ireland who feels hostile towards the Irish language, I would ask you to reflect on the name of your street and to reflect on the name of your town and to question it and to be curious about it, because fuck me, it's where you're from. And then through that, engaging with history and also practical engagement with, say, gardening and using the land, you can start to turn people's viewpoint a wee bit. And that's where we talk about the decolonization of the mind, and that's multifaceted. It's not about language or culture or history. It's about how we want to live in a world which isn't determined or controlled by people who believe that colonialism was a great thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or colonialism gets a bad rap.
I don't know how spiritual you are, but my late spiritual leader was chief. He was a Dakota chief, Black Fox. I met him years ago, and we became like brothers, and I became kind of like his right-hand man. He was a traveling Dakota chief who would do peyote ceremonies, and he was one of the first chiefs to actually do peyote ceremonies with non-natives. And I did my first peyote ceremony with him years ago, and it was an insane experience. I had done ayahuasca in Peru like a year before that, but the peyote ceremony was insane. And what happened was, to me, is during that ceremony, I went through this really deep spiritual trance, and I cried for 30 minutes straight, the hardest I ever cried. And it was a cry of guilt, because I had this, like, call this, you know, overly metaphysical and esoteric, but the guilt of my ancestors towards the Native American people came back at one concentrated moment where I just broke down. I threw up, I puked, I was, and then I just had this calling that happened to me, that he looked at me during the ceremony, and was fucking crazy shit happened. The fire started to spin in like this tornado. This weird shit's happened in that ceremony. And I looked at him and he looked at me. And then I just had this voice tell me that, listen, your job from now on, for the rest of your life, you will swear your allegiance to Indigenous sovereignty. You will fight for them. You will be their warrior, and you will be their bitch for the rest of your life, essentially, is what the message I got. And it was an insane amount of conviction all at one time, and I couldn't handle it. I cried. I just cried, and I cried to an insane amount. And because what's interesting was my ancestor on my mom's side, they were Dakota cowboys, the same Dakota cowboys that massacred his people, the Dakotas. And so I am looking at this Native American chief who was once the victim of my ancestors directly. Like, I guarantee you, if you trace my bloodline back to those cowboys, I guarantee you they made contact with his people and fucking killed them directly. And here I'm getting this message that you will now fight for their sovereignty and their rights for the rest of your life. Doesn't matter. This is what you're dedicating your life to. And after that, that was the thing that pushed me forward. And I don't, like, Americans, like, are geared and trained by our media to be defensive about the colonialism, you know, especially white people. White people are propagandized, and we're one of the most psychologically vulnerable groups in this country, because we are pressed on by these right-wing media sources that are obviously working in collaboration with the liberal media sources to instill this feeling that, listen, you need to defend your ancestry as being a colonizer. It wasn't that bad. We weren't that bad. So take offense to that and then push back. And it's like, why? They're dead. They're fucking dead. The fucking ancestors are gone. Why do you have to take on defending them? Fuck that. You're a new person.
You're 100%. The only responsibility people have is to the truth. And I mean, it will fucking set them free, those people who haven't yet engaged with the truth around colonization. And you are a case in point when you tell about your experience of going to Palestine and then your experience on ayahuasca or peyote. And you're I think touching on something that's fundamentally human, and which was the thing that colonization set out to achieve, was this superiority complex among colonizers versus colonized. And this is manifested and become racism, and this is now totally, like, it's part of our minds. It's part of our structure as human beings now. This racist, stereotypical, lazy, unintellectual view of the other. And it's kind of like what we're trying to get at here is, that truth is out there. It's out there, and it's very easy to find. And if you're genuinely, you're talking about internalized shame and things like that around your heritage and stuff, and that's expected from somebody who saw the truth and like judge that truth against the Cartesian bullshit that they were told growing up, and the colonial lies that they're drip fed, and which are then reinforced through everything from Hollywood to fucking Starbucks and everything. So I mean, I think that there's a lot of fucking merit in people just not feeling like they have to do something that's wrong. You just have to go out and read and watch videos and talk to people and be curious about the truth. If you're coming from a position of privilege and wealth, or if your family has historically been of that ilk, I mean, you have more access to literature and probably have a decent education already. So it's even easier for you to come to terms with the truth because you'll know where to source it. So it's totally lazy. Anybody who is white and who believes that colonialism hasn't affected them either positively or in the context of Ireland and some other unique examples negatively and positively, then you can kind of be lost in the bullshit that it's not my fault and it was hundreds of years ago and what am I supposed to do? I mean, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. It was maybe someone in my family history. So yeah, calling that out as a necessary part of decolonization is we have to speak to each other as Western people about what this phenomenon of decolonization is trying to do. It's trying to re-educate and move people towards humanity, actually.
And on a selfish level, let's talk about a selfish level. Okay, there's the egalitarian and altruistic motive, but also if by not connecting with the world and the suffering of people and tears that of the empire that's below you, especially when it comes to privilege, you're robbing by not connecting with that. You're robbing yourself of a beautiful world. Like, how different were you when you went to Palestine? When you were in Palestinian villages in Palestine, how different were you when you came back home? What did it do to you, your soul?
It was just kind of, I mean, it's hard to put into words because it was like a deep want to stay there and to be there and to be with them people, because I heard on numerous occasions that actually when white people are with us, we're a lot less likely to be targeted and to be. So I was like, just by the mere presence of me being here in this village, these people are less likely to be murdered. And I was like, weighing that up against if I go home and try and do things politically or culturally to help these people, is that even going to do anything, or staying here better? It's only I have a partner and a child here, and it would be extremely selfish for me to stay out there. It also felt extremely selfish to come home and so just being there was like a privilege in one sense, but it's almost like a guilt. Like as an Irish person, I feel the guilt because I had to tell people I was Irish, and up to that point, they kind of think you're American or they think you're English, or they, and that to me was, I made a point of telling people we're from Ireland, we understand the history of colonization, but what's happening to you is a shit ton worse than whatever happened to us, because what happened to us was done in the context of there not being a global media, of there not being an awareness, an institutional awareness of slavery and colonization. It happened during colonial post-feudal times. So what's happening now to Palestinians is 100 million times worse than what happened to the Irish, because it's being done by a group of elites that are totally and utterly aware and they know that scholars are aware and that there's a public discourse out there that is aware of the fact that it's totally and utterly colonization what they're doing in Palestine. And so my fuck shit, part of me wanted to stay and join the resistance there, and part of me wanted to come home and be part of a resistance movement here and to levy my privilege against leverage my privilege against the state, the apparent state in the north of Ireland and the south of Ireland, which are largely perceived as being pro-Palestine. We're going to put that to the fucking test. We're going to put it to the test here over the next few months, and we'll see how pro-Palestine our leaders are when they're given the opportunity to, make comments about the actions that we're planning on doing and so on. So, unfortunately, it's been too late coming. This should have been happening. I mean, the day after October 7th, we were organising for Palestinians because I know what was coming. I knew what was coming. I was there during 2014, 2018, 2021. I remember seeing what they do to Palestinians. And then I was just kind of going, right, if we don't get active now, and a lot of people in the Palestine movement in Belfast on October 8th were on the streets. So that has carried through, but it would be nothing without community building and without innovation and without, that action that happened last week. There was a takeover of both institutional media, one the BBC and RT in Ireland, and that was done, with the awareness that we need to escalate actions. We can't continue to do protests. Even when Martin Luther King and the mass civil disobedience movement were marching, they weren't fucking marching to wave a flag. They were marching to do something, to sit in, to block a bridge, to wait to the White House. They were marching as part of a movement that was going to do something beyond the march. And that's, I think, where we need to be at right now as a global movement, is we need to be thinking that our peaceful pleas and calls for, let's just say we're trying to uphold the Geneva Convention. We've been trying to do that for a year and a half. Our states are supposed to do it. Individuals are supposed to do it. We've tried it. Our states have ignored our pleas. Therefore, we have a precedent now to escalate actions beyond peaceful protest, where you move into peaceful, non-violent mass civil disobedience as a strategy and a tactic. And that'll be what puts the West to the test, I think, because they like to talk about Martin Luther King. Don't like to talk about Malcolm X. They like to talk about Martin Luther King. They like to talk about Gandhi. They like to talk about the suffragettes.
It's all just it's like they shove resistance in a museum and say, hey, look how cool that was. But hey, guys, that's in the past. We're living in better times now. We're living in much better times. All that stuff is not going on. So just look at it in a museum and just enjoy it in the museum. Don't bring it out. Don't bring it out of the museum. Keep it there. That's what they want to do. They don't want to talk about Fred Hampton. They don't want to do what Fred Hampton did. And
a 21-year-old assassinated for organizing his community peacefully. Assassinated. So this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with psychopaths.
That motherfucker united the young patriots, the young lords, and black people, black liberation fighters in one movement. What the fuck? Do you know that the young patriots had a Confederate flag in their meetings? And he was able to walk right in and say, hey, look, if this building's burning down, what's our culture? It's fucking water, because we need to put out the fire. You got the only identity that, like, look, all these identities, and this is something that I've become more and more enlightened to via some friends that I've met through this movement, through the podcast, who recognize me, and I've been going hiking with them. They said they turned me on to this concept that identity can be really annoying when it comes to revolution. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then he was telling me, like, look, one of the best methods of the empire keeping us kind of separated from us linking arms is identity. And I get it. Identity is cute, it's cute. It's cute that if you belong to a certain subculture, it's adorable. Don't get me wrong, but it's not going to fucking save you when the police kick the door down and haul you off to a concentration camp. It doesn't matter if you belong to some quaint little Christian community. If the police kick your door down and drag you off to El Salvador or a Guantanamo Bay, your identity don't mean shit. The only identity that you really truly have is you're fucking poor. And I know that sounds harsh to say, because a lot of people in the audience will be like, "Oh, I'm not poor. I got a house and a car." It's like, no. If you don't have $1 billion, you're fucking poor, because that's the only thing that's going to save your ass, is if you have a fucking $1 billion. And I'm sorry to say this, the only identity that really fucking matters in this circumstance is you're fucking poor, and that's everybody. So if you're fucking poor, they will grab you and you have no power. Unless you can bribe a top official with millions of dollars, you're fucking poor. So people need to grasp onto that. And as great as it is to have certain identities, you have to understand that do not retreat into that identity. You think that like you have a community set up and you belong to a subculture that you grew up with, that's great. And there's a lot of culture and wisdom and spiritual guidance that might come with that. That's great. But at the end of the day, do not retreat into that when shit hits the fan. In fact, expand outward to the people that you normally would never associate with. It's the only fucking way it says get over, you know, and
That's
and back to where you're.
There's a great. I mean, I love Paulo Freire. I don't know if you have heard of Paulo Freire, but he's a liberation theologist who basically used the Bible to educate people in literature in South America. And he was a sort of a socialist, but he was an educational philosopher, and a lot of what happens in youth work is kind of derived from his theories around, you know, critical consciousness and things like that. So basically, Paulo Freire is for us, you know, when we look at what's in front of us right now, Paulo Freire, for me anyway, would be sort of like a source theorist. What do you call it? Required reading, and one of his sort of enthusiastic students is Henry Giroux, who's an famous American educationalist, and he talks about connecting the dots. So he talks about exactly what, you know, intersectionality is the modern term for it or whatever, but it's looking at all of those disparate movements and subcultures and communities that exist out there, and they exist because they give people meaning and connection, and there's an empathetic framework and you understand each other. And what you're talking about is joining those movements up under the banner of a sort of a class awareness of, and maybe the language of Marx is dated, and maybe working class and the proletariat versus the fucking, you know, the bourgeoisie might be dated, but the fucking analysis remains for me the same, is that you're ultimately, you either have it or you don't. And if you don't, and that's the gap between having it and not having it is so big now, it's bigger than it was during Marx's time, that maybe those arguments need, you know, when you look at Antonio Gramsci and some of the lessons of 20th century Marxists to see where the ideology can be updated. And Gramsci even talks about like building a large, you know, movement of people across classes who can use their privilege to leverage power against imperialism, so to speak, and I think that's where we need to get to, because when I go to the pro-Palestine marches in Belfast, it's school teachers who are largely middle class. It's that so I think the illusion of subclassing people is now being stretched to its maximum position, where like the middle classes are essentially glorified working class, but they're ideologically more in line with billionaires. And it's mad that as the separation increases, so too does the fucking
it makes no fucking but isn't that crazy?
Some psychologist will probably tell us why, you know. So please come and fucking tell us why. But there's
fuck it. I'm not waiting for a psychologist to come in on this. I just want to talk about how insane that is. How people at home, by watching hustle culture videos, you know, you go on TikTok, right? You got some dude who's jacked up on steroids. It's like, listen, you get up at 3 a.m. and you hit it hard. You make a to-do list. You get out there, you start an LLC, you get a loan, and then you leverage that loan. Shut the fuck up. It's not going to fucking save you. And what you do is you have this whole class of young guys like our age who are like, okay, the reason why I'm in this situation is I'm not hustling hard enough. You know, not like these fucking losers who aren't waking up until 8 a.m. I'm getting up at 4 a.m. It's like, you dumb motherfucker. You realize they're feeding you that shit so you can you can focus your attention on hustling harder and being a prostitute for fucking capitalism, as opposed to just saying, hey, fuck this shit. Why the fuck am I starving? Why the fuck am I busting my ass 12 hours a day just to make fucking rent while these fucking billionaires get all these tax cuts and they can fucking jerk off in their little suite up in Fifth Avenue while I'm fucking busting my ass to make them fucking profit? It's like, how about you start thinking about that if you want to be a real fucking man instead of thinking they got to hustle harder? Anyway, sorry about that, bro. I got
it's a pretty pathetic state of play that we're in. And that's again where I said earlier on about the internet and social, social media and all of that being a Pandora's box, a double-edged sword, is that, but effectively, I think for me anyway, I get a lot of inspiration from the fact that Goebbels wrote a letter to a guy called Edward Bernays, who had took the word propaganda and had turned it into public relations. So this is like I think he was like maybe a nephew of Sigmund Freud or something like that, but he emigrated to America and he sets up the public relations office in Washington. I believe it was Washington. His name was Edward Bernays, and I think he brought on the Letterman show in the 70s or 80s or something like that. And he's asked by Mr. Letterman, or one of those fucking wankers, he's asked basically, what is it that we're dealing with here with your concept of public relations? And he addresses him as Dr. Bernays, and he says, well, we're dealing with the very concept that simply by calling me Dr. Bernays, you will believe anything that I say after this point. And I think there's something in the fact that, like, propaganda is propaganda. It's not good or bad. It's just, can you create a message that is, impactful enough, and it's glittery enough, and it's sexy enough that it can land? And a great example of that, for me anyway, is NCAT and how they're propagandizing their own journey and so on. And what I'm saying here is, we should all be trying to create propaganda, but the difference is that our propaganda is based in truth. And it's just, for us, it's seen as a bit uncool to be on the left. It's a bit of, you're an old fogey, or you're talking all that language like equality, or, that's all old. So we need to find sexier, fucking better ways of talking about decolonization, of talking about, a new economic system. And it needs to be short form. Some of it needs to be sexy. It needs to be nice. And I don't know where the fuck my band stands, because we just created a 10-minute song. So I'm clearly not listening to my own message here. But I mean, pushing forward, we as a left, or whatever you want to call us as a group of poor people, need to get really fucking hot about how we propagandize our journey of decolonization. And that's kind of why I was taking in videos in Palestine, and they were all about a minute, and they were all short, snappy. As I'm not doing anything that people don't know. I'm way behind where a lot of fucking maybe bands and people who are trying to use the internet and culture are, in terms of how to do that, simply because we don't have enough money as a band. We're not signed. We don't have any money in the bank, and we're trying to create it all ourselves, but we're having moderate success in doing that. And that, to me, just vindicates that anybody can do this. If fucking I can do it, and I'm not anything, then anybody can do this. And and I bet you there's people out there who can do it a hell of a lot better than all of us. And they're the type of people we want to attract. That's young people, gamers, people who are fucking used to using, TikTok and technology. They're the fucking, I mean, it's only young people who are going to change this world. We include ourselves as young people here. And that's the message that needs to get through. And that's where art, for me, artists are the last line of defense against imperialism, because once they've came for everybody, it's the artists who sing about it and who talk about it. And that's where I'm kind of like attracted to music and stuff. So,
yeah. No, and you mentioned the Gen Z, the younger generation. I am so optimistic, and I'm not trying to be optimistic. I'm not like one of those guys who just tries to look at the bright side. I'm literally look at this generation of young folks at Gen Z, and they are so smart. Like, quite frankly, they're so sharp. And the reason why is because you and I, we were born somewhat in that propaganda generation. We were still fed, your mainstream lies. The Gen
6
Z
o'clock
generation,
news. 6 o'clock news. That's not a thing anymore. News. It's not a thing anymore. Virtually zero people under 21 are watching the 6 o'clock news. Like, I'd put my head out and say that.
Yeah, there's podcasts that aren't that big that have more viewership than your mainstream, news channels. And so they're born in this post-propaganda world where you and I, we're still in shock about the propaganda that we were told that's not being true. Like, constantly, our generation is learning about the things that we thought were true this whole time, we're stuck in this state of denial first, and then acceptance. Like, holy fuck, I was lied to about that too. Whereas Gen Z is just like, oh yeah, we're already making TikToks about it. Like they're making TikToks about CIA strategies, and we're still learning about CIA strategies that we had no idea were actually a thing, you know. So
and this is where like there's a crisis. There has been a crisis in education for a long time. Like my background is I do a bit of youth work on that, but my sort of understanding is that there has been a crisis in formal education in the school system for a long time, and it's largely down to the fact that it was created along industrial lines and it was never innovated or updated. And what we're seeing is, you know, young people, through having access to the internet, through having their phones, are just exposed to, you know, on one side the risk is that they become those dude bro fucking pumpers, you know, who talk about why immigration is such a problem, but they don't know how to fucking, you know, they don't even know what immigration is, essentially, and why it's created and what it's a result of, but they just hate it. And then you've got a whole contingent of young people who, without trying to pigeonhole them, are maybe humanitarian in their thinking and realize well before we realize that they have the means of production here. And it's just like, can we encourage more young people to do that? Fucking right, we can, and we should. And I think, you know, it just takes people like us who are a bit younger, maybe, to fucking to reach out to the younger generation in that. So,
and give them confidence. Like, let them know, listen, you have a leg up on us. You are smarter than us. And that's what I tell Gen Z guys. I'm like, listen, you are way fucking smarter than me. You are way more capable than I am. You give them that confidence to know that you don't need us old fucks and the fucks who are older than us to give you the tools you need, because you already have them. But just start learning your history and start making history cool again with the young generation. Really start digging in and make it a trend. Make studying like real history, indigenous history, not the propagandized history. And you're gonna be schooling these old fucks before you know it, and you're going to be taken over. And that's why I'm optimistic. Greg gives me shit for being optimistic, and then I give him shit for being emo. So fuck it. You know,
what do they say? Pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. Isn't that, have you heard that expression before? And that's kind of like, yeah, that's definitely where I'm at. If you're not pessimistic after you read history and see it, there's something fucking wrong with you. But if you don't be optimistic about your ability to change that for the future, then you're kind of falling into the trap that was set for you by the same people who made you pessimistic in the first place. So we're kind of just like, absolutely, like, we're using music, we're using fucking, you know, music videos, we're using political messaging. We're not quite there yet in terms of, we don't have a huge infrastructure as a band. We've only been going just under 2 years, actually. We've been going, and you know, it's a very hard place to be in as a young band. You know, in an age where, like, by and large, music has no role to play in revolutionary sentiment anymore. You know, a lot of protest music was co-opted into capitalism. You know, and fucking there's these people who are held up as, you know, this is when protest music started. It started when Woody Guthrie lifted his guitar, which, nothing against Woody Guthrie, love him to death, but it fucking didn't start with Woody Guthrie, let me tell you. And it certainly wasn't, you know, championed by Johnny Cash beyond any further that it was championed by people like Victor Hara, or if you go back further, you know, people in revolutionary movements all around the world who use poetry and music and art as a means of resistance. So it's kind of like we're as a band operating in like one of the worst times to be a fucking band, because there hasn't been any bands for the last 20 years. They're all fuckheads, every one of them. I'd give Green Day or Class, Rage Against the Machine or Class, but there hasn't been anybody really since 2005, in my view, who have tried to or who have become commercially successful while also having a very clear political view and standpoint on things.
Well, why is that? Why do you think that is? What factors have played into that?
Because popular music, in my view, has been it's been the tool of the elites throughout history. You go back as far as you had to be fucking rich in the 17 and 1800s to hear a bit of music. You know, you had to be actually rich to go to a symphony and to hear Wagner or fucking Beethoven or someone like that. You had to be rich, so you were cut off. Then music as a phenomenon sort of derives from communities. You know, you look at the country and bluegrass movement, you look at the, you know, the pre-punk movement through all of the folk music artists, and you look at rock and roll stemming from black people, and you look at it being commercialized and co-opted into white culture, and rock being now synonymous with just white people. And you have a bit of a joke where like you don't really have many black people would listen to Korn. Actually, that's not true. Actually, a lot of hip hop fans or metal fans as well. But I think, without fucking going around the houses, music has been a tool of the elites and has been used to quell the rebellious spirit in people just at the time when it needed to be promoted. And people, you know, you look at neoliberalism. I mean, the first test ground really for neoliberal capitalist expansion in the modern world in recent history, you could look at Chile, you could look at Allende, and you could look at Victor Jara. Victor Jara was executed in a stadium along with 3,000 other fucking union workers and young people and students and activists, simply for writing music that was anti-capitalist, which was anti-colonial, which is, so that's what happens to you if you really try and say what you really want to say in your music. But maybe, hopefully, through the last number of years, through the likes of Kneecap and Lankum and other Irish bands in particular, the Mary Wallopers, other Irish bands and other bands throughout the world, having that wee sort of glimmer of access to the mainstream commercial, I think hopefully we're on the cusp of, you know, a global revolution of which music will be a large part of that. And that's why we're trying to position ourselves as a band in that space, because we want to be able to tell people through music that, you know, first of all, we want to make music that's nice to listen to and people can selfishly engage with it if they want to do that. But beyond that, we want to open doors for people. We want to lead people to areas of history and modern history and contemporary life, which are totally fucked by colonialism and have been, you know, largely abandoned by most artists. That's in film and in music. And I think, the Nazis understood the power of music, the power of the move, the spirit. Most of the composers in Nazi Germany had been co-opted into the Nazi movement and were writing symphonies for Nazis by the early 1930s. So, I mean, is there space within contemporary commercial music for a radical political message? Probably not, but a wee bit maybe. And it's those wee moments that kind of capture the imagination. You look at the Sex Pistols and they're kind of like, you know, God Save the Queen, the impact of punk music, you know. But again, I'm very suspicious of the history of music as told by white people.
Because you look, there's, not to go down a conspiracy rabbit hole, but you look at how the MK Ultra played such a role in co-opting the music industry. Like you look at like the Beatles, right? And you look at they came out of nowhere. And I'm just gonna say it, I know this is a hot take, but the Beatles, I didn't get it, but like apparently they were co-opted by Aleister Crowley, who was, you know, very high up, you know, in elite circles. And then you had the MK Ultra program here in the United States during the hippie movement. You saw the MK Ultra program weaponize people like Charles Manson, who was directly a psyop to infiltrate the hippie movement and co-opt the music.
Ted Kaczynski also.
Yeah.
The Unabomber. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more that the awareness by intelligence agencies and by the elites in general around the power of music, it actually just goes back to propaganda, actually, because that's all it is. If it's soft indoctrination into a banal apolitical view of art, and that's what I believe music has become, and that's been intensely, you know, intensified over the last 20 years, and that's at the same time as the separation between the middle class and, you know, billionaires increases, so too does the distance between music and the people. And that's like caricatured through fucking I don't know Miley Cyrus and people like that licking hammers and things like that. What the fuck does that mean? What does it mean? Who's it aimed at? Why are you doing that? Whereas, maybe if you go back, we look at hip hop, we look at the NWA, we look at fucking, that era in American history. And what resulted from that era was, a co-option of hip hop into R&B, which then has become like there's no genre of music anymore. It's just all a mixture of dance and, again, dance music having its roots in fucking backroom underground raves to becoming like the pinnacle of individualism as a musician. It's just kind of all a wee bit fucked. And I think we as a society are on the cusp of a global, I don't know, a mass strike of some kind, or as I said, a shift in the gear in terms of like if Trump keeps doing what he's doing, if the dumb followers of Trump all around the world in terms of countries keep following what he's doing, and then we're going to be in that space very soon, and we're going to be fucked. If there's nobody to sing about it, we're fucked, because that's always been a part of the movement. Sorry.
Well, that's the importance of bands like yours, is that it decentralizes music, and that's what we need. We need decentralization of music. Like I think we're seeing the fall of celebrity culture for sure, and that is a beautiful gift from the heavens to humanity. Right, it's one of the latest Titanics that has sunk due to the revelation of what Zionism truly is, and I always see Israel as like this Titanic, where on the Titanic you have all the people who were co-opted and took the bribery that came along with it and the corruption, and then everybody on that ship is sinking along with it, including celebrities, including journalists, including like the New York Times, including political leaders. Institutions that were once seen as like benevolent are now sinking with this ship of Zionism in Israel. And what Israel doesn't realize is it gave humanity a gift by kind of co-opting all these people, because now it's kind of revealed to us that all this elite culture was fucking bullshit. They're just a bunch of fucking rich, spoiled brats who are cringe as fuck. They have no culture. They have no cool factor. We're like the revolution is already starting culturally in that regard by the sinking of music culture, as far as the elite music culture. I want to see if this plays. This is the response by Fox and Friends to Green Day and Kneecap's Coachella performance. And this is stereotypical of the conservative and mainstream reaction to it. Hopefully the audio plays with this. So let me know if you hear this.
Never even heard of.
Can you hear that?
If they want to be for the Palestinian people, then they shouldn't be anti-Israel. They should be anti-Hamas. Yeah. And to see on stage a large billboard that says F Israel.
Unreal.
It's unreal. No, this didn't happen in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. This was in 2025 in America. Beyond staggering.
I don't know what they're saying because I can't hear shit, but I'm just.
I feel like we can see how it got here, which is the absolute. How do we combat it now? How do we turn these young people around?
Well, I think we have to remove these activists from these authority positions. I think that's the best word for it. We've seen.
Okay.
So they apparently they're not artists.
So that's. I love that clip. It shows the panic. Is that not a beautiful sight to see, to watch the elite panic with this? I mean, you got to think the audience that's watching that, they're a bunch of boomers sitting in their recliners at home, like, oh my God, what's happening to the world these days? Goddamn kids are just getting out of control and standing up for Palestine. They're terrorists. It's great. It's great. I love the disintegration of their logic. So. Anyways,
yes, it's a beautiful thing to watch.
We got a few more things to touch on.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing to watch, and it makes it even more beautiful because Kneecap is from West Belfast, where I'm from, and we would all sort of be, from the same place, the same state, the same apartheid state, and they're just doing what needs to be done in simple terms, and the reaction, for them to come from somewhere like where I came from, and to be able to provoke a reaction from Sharon Osbourne on fucking, you know, why it's wrong for them to do. I mean, it's just surreal. It's totally surreal. And the lads are so fucking humble. Like, they really are the most humble guys, and the whole entourage around them, just humble, working class, decent people. And they are fucking causing the empire to disintegrate in front of our eyes at some level. And it's fucking it is popcorn time in some respect. And for me, it's just like, long may it continue. And I want to see 1,000 kneecaps. You know, so that's just the crack, and I think there's something in that in terms of hip hop, what they're doing with hip hop, and what they're doing in terms of, you know, we basically had a load of black hip hop leaders throughout the 80s and 90s, early 2000s. To then have Eminem as the like internationally recognized white person related to hip hop, and now you've Macklemore, and now you've Kneecap, and you've got that sort of like recreation of you know, hip hop as a means of art being used by people beyond the black communities of America, and you know, actually hip hop's international. There's fucking rappers from all around the world, but there hasn't really been rappers from Ireland, you know, with this degree of success. There has been rappers from Ireland, don't get me wrong, but there hasn't been this level of success, and I think it's because of how unapologetically Fenian Kneecap are, in the sense of, like, they know where they come from, they know who they are, they know who their enemies are, and they know how easy it is to rail them. And this is where I get back to propagandizing and what you do, and this is where, you know, we need to all, as artists, get a wee bit more savvy around this shit, and it's fucking going to be pressure points for days. So
I can't wait to
see
I can't wait to see more clips from Fox and Friends in the movie.
Yeah, well, that's it.
And it's going to become, the reaction is going to become more and more cringe, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
There's something really that I can't. You might be able to run that video back and watch it yourself, but not the blonde lady, but the lady who's interviewing the blonde lady. She goes to make a comment about young people and something to do with Palestine, but she doesn't finish the comment because she can't, because there's nothing for her to say. So she flips it really quickly and says, and turns it back on Kneecap. And it just goes to the stupidity of these people as individuals, number one, but it speaks volumes of the fact that they don't have a truth behind what they're doing. So it's going to be twice as hard for them to propagandize, you know, than it is for us. As long as we understand that when Goebbels wrote that letter to Edward Bernays, he was basically saying, I love what you've done with propaganda, because it's the same thing. It's public relations. And the more our generation and those after us can get good at public relations, as you say, capitalism survives on its ability to brand and rebrand itself. We on the left, humanitarians, need to rebrand how we talk about colonization, how we talk about decolonization. And one of the best ways to do that, in my view, is through art and film and music and podcasting and like what yous are doing and what we're doing, and just long may that type of shit continue.
Absolutely, 100%. I want to switch gears, going back to Palestine. I didn't get to flesh that out as much as I wanted to with you. Let's play this video that you wanted me to play, which I think is a quintessential microcosm of the situation, of the insanity of Zionism. Here we go. Let's see if this works. Where to go? It's coming. It's loaded.
Coming from America, settling in potentially in Gaza, kicking Palestinians out. A lot of people would see that as settler colonialism.
It's not really colonialism, it's a return. My grandparents were kicked out of Israel by Arabs who were trying to establish a Palestinian state, and they had to leave for their survival, and I'm just coming back and fulfilling their dream. The second thing is, I think that, and I know this is a minority view, I think colonialism gets a bad rap. Like, is bad, but colonizing places that are genocidal and they have bad ideology, it's good to come in and correct their views.
Okay, so I think colonialism gets a bad rap. I don't know why. I have no fucking idea why. I mean, who
has
dies?
to be,
Who gets
it
hurt?
has to be ignorant. That has to be from a place of ignorance. That cannot be a real position unless you're totally fucking, fascist, that you understand and you're doing it, and for me, that's like, it just so happened to be a blonde white woman. No offense, my sisters are blonde
Who
and
is
white.
Yeah, no offense, but she is white as fuck. Dude, I am white. I am really white. She is white. Like white, dude. And look, God bless her soul. She has to use, I mean, to be sympathetic to her, she has to use higher SPF sunscreen, no doubt. But and I know how that is. You're out in the sun, you gotta reapply it because the sweat will make it drip off. But
the sun must have penetrated her skull at some level and burnt with UV some level of stupidity into your brain. And I mean, that's that. But that's the thing about me, is that is the typical widespread settler colonial ideology around Israel. Completely different set of settler colonial views in Ireland. People weren't returning to Ireland. They came here knowing fine rightly that it didn't belong to them. But there's so many stupid people who happen to be Jewish and who happen to think that Zionism is, the expression of Judaism, when actually, I mean, you look back in Jewish history, the history of rabbis against Zionism, and you just see that it was a creation of white Western European imperialists, and unfortunately the Jewish people became a pawn in the game of colonial expansionism in the Middle East and the Levant. And I just think that people like her just don't understand. They don't have any concept of history, and that's why she's being a fucking absolute muppet.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And one thing I noticed about that video, if you look at her face, and it's kind of, and speaking of dreams that she's talking about, one of my dreams as a kid, because my mother was, I grew up in a therapist home. My mother was a therapist. My sister's a therapist. Her husband's a therapist. One of my dreams was to become a psychologist that focused on cults. I really was fascinated with cults, and I wanted to understand the ins and outs of the psychology involved in cults. And you look at her face, you can tell she's part of a cult. You can just see that the expression on her face is, like you said, it's ignorance. And I do actually have empathy for that woman, because I know that she was probably surrounded by people who were constantly telling her to fear the outside world, and that she is appointed and anointed, and the God's chosen, and everybody else is subhuman. And they hate you, and they want to kill you. And if you're a Jew and you go outside of your bounds of Israel, they will eat you alive because of what happened during the Holocaust. And when I was in Israel, I studied at yeshivas. I studied Hebrew. I can speak and write and have a rusty conversation in Hebrew. And I would go to yeshivas. It's like a little adventure. And they didn't know that I wasn't Jewish at these yeshivas. And these yeshivas, these were like one of the most Zionist yeshivas on the planet. They were crazy. They were insane. And they had no idea that I was a Christian. Non-Jewish white boy. They just assumed I was Jewish. And the stuff that I heard, it was the same theme that I would hear at all of these yeshivas is the outside world hates you, and they're all animals, and you're superior they hate you because you're superior. Fear the outside world, and understand that the Palestinians are they are the worst. They are your worst enemies. They are like the new iteration they're the latest iteration of Goey. And I was listening to this, and I'm like, my first reaction to it was not offend. I wasn't offended, because I know that they're talking about people like me and people who aren't, Jewish. And I'm like, I'm not offended by this, but I am very heartbroken that these young Jewish kids from America are soaking this in, and they have a huge opportunity to chase dreams on this planet that go outside the bounds of supremacy. And this motherfucker right here, this motherfucking rabbi just robbed these young Jewish kids of that dream by pumping them with this toxic ideology. What the fuck? And so I was offended. I was offended in that regard.
But it's interesting that siege mentality that you're talking about is like, that's universal across settler colonialism. So you go, you occupy, you settle, and then you create an ideological framework, which is about siege. You're under siege. Everybody outside of the walls of this colony are here to get you, and they're savages. And this is where you've basically got then the superiority complex then emerges from this. And this is why when I was in Palestine, on the rare occasion that we got to see or hear or interact with any Zionists, it was again around, I'll give you one example. When we were in the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, we passed a tour guide who was given a tour. He was an American Zionist, Christian Zionist, and he was given a tour to a group of what I am assuming were young American Christians. And he was talking about the need to reconquer the land, the need for Jewish people to reconquer the land. So there's a load of things going on there. Why is he saying that to American Christians? We all know that the American right, the Christian Bible Belt, Christian Zionism is like the biggest funder of, I think, the Jewish National Fund, if not the exclusively largest funder of Zionism across all the occupied territories. And to hear this white man from the West stand in Al-Aqsa Mosque, facing the Al-Aqsa Mosque itself, and speak to a group of largely white American children about why the Jewish people need to reconquer the land and take it back from the Arabs, to me was a moment where I just went, I'm way behind where I thought this place was. This place is, they've already made their bed. They want the total annihilation of the Palestinian people. And that is an interesting segue into a meeting that we had with former Director of Communications from UNRWA. UNRWA being the sole social service body across Palestine, responsible for education and social welfare and healthcare and so on. What he said, and not in so many words, was that Gaza is a smokescreen. Gaza has always been used as a distraction, albeit a genocidal distraction, to get the eye off Jerusalem, number one, and to get the eye off the West Bank, number two. And what they're doing, and what it all is all sort of like a penny drop moment for me was, so this guy who was a former director of communications in Gaza for UNRWA, then formerly the director of communications for UNRWA in the West Bank, now just a member of UNRWA. I don't think he holds that position anymore, but he sat with us very candidly and told us that Gaza, by and large, is a distraction for the removal of UNRWA in the occupied territories, because in UNRWA is the only legal framework for the right to return and the occupation. And if you remove UNRWA, and what did they do during the onslaught post-October 7th was try to characterize UNRWA as Hamas. Hamas have every right to resist. I just want to say Hamas have every single right to resist under occupation, brutal occupation from 1948, intense occupation from 1967, blockaded from 2005, and made to live in misery and shit fuckery for the last 20 years and countless wars levied against them. They have a right to resist. If anybody has a fucking right to resist, it is Hamas in Gaza. And perhaps that might have been different had genuine freedom been part of the deal, in 1967, but it wasn't. Post 1967, you've got a fucking intense colonization. Now we'll have something upward of 750,000 settlers in the West Bank. So if they're able to remove UNRWA, then that's the game over for the right to return, which is basically the last Custer's last stand for the Palestinians. And so I mean, for me, when I hear Christian Zionists standing in Al-Aqsa Mosque telling other Christians that the Jewish people have a right to, genocide these people and also to take back a land, well, when did it belong to them? I mean, just look at the list of fucking names, the name changes of the political leadership of Zionism. Every one of them, Milikowski, fucking, you've got Miriam Regev, you've fucking, countless others. You've Ben Gurion himself. So I mean,
it's also so blasphemous. The name changes. Just a real quick thing is like Netanyahu's name is so offensive to me, and I'll tell you why. Netanyahu, that name contains the holy name of God in the Torah, and this motherfucker changes his ugly ass name, Milikowski, to Netanyahu, which means gift from God. And to me, it's so offensive to me as a person who actually values the Bible somewhat. That's really offensive. Same with the Merkava tank. The Merkava is the throne of God in the vision of Ezekiel in the Bible. And they named a fucking tank that commits genocide after that. They named David Sling to name their anti-aircraft or their one of their anti-missile measures. They use these biblical terms to seduce and give evangelical Christians this sense that they are the ancient Israelites, when DNA proves the Palestinians are the ancient Israelites. It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
DNA tests aren't allowed. So how you're ever going to prove that? But it's mad. I mean, you look at the obviously, and without a doubt, the Jewish people have been victims of pogroms and of discrimination for time immemorial. But so have loads of other people, and this unique space that Jewish people are afforded, largely stems from those historical pogroms, and then exacerbated by the Holocaust, obviously. But it is a fucking joke that
and I've told we did an episode on kind of like how the whole lobbying system works, and I use that as an opportunity to give my spiel on this when it comes to anti-Semitism. And I made the point that the reason why you see people in places of power that happen to be Jewish is because of the same argument that Israel uses towards Hamas, but this time it's true. It's human shields. The reason why empire and capitalism surrounds itself by Jewish people is to be a buffer zone between the people who are oppressed and the working class, because if they surround themselves by Jewish people, you create a human shield factor. And any criticism you aim towards capitalism, they can say, oh, it's anti-Semitism because look at all these Jewish people in power. It's very strategic because the majority of Jews are fucking poor. And the majority of Jews who fucking died in Holocaust were fucking poor people. And the elites got away with it. So it's about class. And like you said, they've afforded anti-Semitism this special space amongst racism because of the fact that they need to protect the empire from any type of sentiments against capitalism. And by surrounding, by disproportionately placing Jewish people in positions of management, they've created human shields so that when shit hits the fan, instead of the populations that have experienced these atrocities throughout the world, instead of blaming the ruling class, they blame poor Jews. And it's such a sick game that Israel plays in that. Is that Israel
it's the most well, Zionism
most
is
anti-Semitic shit on the planet.
100%. And that's now become part of the discourse. That very concept of Zionism equaling anti-Semitism, that would not have been part of any discourse in the mainstream for a long time. And that's, as you say, potentially strategic. And it's really interesting what you say about the overrepresentation of Jewish people in positions of power. It's something that I've always been curious about, and it's something
it's strategic. It's the perfect human shield because it creates this illusion that Jews as an ethnic group or religion are controlling the whole strings of power. When in fact it's just these sick elites that engage in the most depraved practices. They want to create a buffer zone between the population and us, so that when shit hits, like I said, when people want to take it out on somebody, instead of going after the elites who control power, they'll go after the Jewish guy down the street, like as if the Jewish guy down the street has any fucking power at all. He's poor like the rest of us, and it's very effective, and you see that,
and it's very dangerous in the sense of like. Because then Israel is then used to further promote the idea of Zionism to the ordinary working poor Jewish person, who I would say majority will defend Israel simply because of the propaganda that's being fed to them about Israel is that it's a homeland, but you have so many people emerging now. So many rabbis, spiritual Jews, secular Jews, all coming out now. Even some people within Israel, very, very few. And I don't even like to acknowledge Israel, necessarily as being a legal entity. It was created, in my view, illegally through the colonization of Palestine, the land of Palestine. But the space that Israel, is linked to is like a calling card to the souls of Jewish people all around the world, because of the way that the manufacturing of consent for Israel has been done. It's been done through every facet of media, culture, AIPAC, and they're reaching the democratic decision-making processes throughout history in America is why it's like that. So in my view, they shan't be separated. Do you know what I mean? America and Israel cannot be separated. The UN and Israel cannot be separated. The modern era of what you might call the era of the rules-based order, or the post-World War II world, fuck me, the more and more that the links between Israel, AIPAC, America, and Zionism are exposed, the more and more skeptical I get about whether or not this international framework was ever created to protect people against genocide, or if it was created in order to protect certain types of people against genocide in a historical sense, using the Holocaust as, the worst genocide in history, when, there was a genocide in the Congo, there was a genocide in Ireland, all within a relatively short historical time period from the Jewish Holocaust. So it's kind of, for me, it's opened up a space for me personally, as a person who's interested in history, to start looking at what influence has AIPAC and Zionism held over America, and who is what end of the dog is wagging what end. Because for me, it looks like
we broke that down in an episode with Alina, the way we're breaking it down is like, ironically, AIPAC is a laundering scheme. So the majority of the bribery in the form of lobbying money is actually not even coming from AIPAC. The number one lobbying group is the real estate companies. They bribe the most. And what's ironic about that is the reason why you see AIPAC constantly being put on the news is because they want us to look in the direction of AIPAC. The money that AIPAC gives to politicians is peanuts compared to the real corruption that's actually going on through the real estate lobbying group. And now the reason why the real estate lobbying group is the biggest contributor to the pockets of politicians is connected with Gaza, ironically. Because who stands to benefit if Gaza is ethnically cleansed? It's going to be Blackstone. Blackstone is the most powerful. It's the reason why I like the majority of Americans cannot afford a home right now, a brand new home, is because Blackstone had bought up like 40% of them during COVID. Ironically, Blackstone is the same firm that stands to benefit from Gaza being ethnically cleansed, because guess who's going to get the rebuilding contracts for real estate? It's going to be Blackstone. And that's why they don't want you to look at that lobbying group. They want you to look at AIPAC. AIPAC, don't get me wrong, they donate some money. But the money that the politicians stand to make on the dividends through their investment with Blackstone is that's the real connection to Gaza. The real connection to Gaza is that, and I'll reiterate this again, if Gaza is ethnically cleansed and they turn it into the next Dubai and a trade port and a port city, the finances, the future profits, and the return on investment is going to go to the real estate companies that our politicians are invested in. So the real money is not lobbying, it's dividends, because they buy in certain stocks at a certain price. And if they ethnically cleanse Gaza, which I don't believe they will, because hopefully everybody will put a fucking stop to it, inshallah. Guess who's gonna fucking reap the benefits? All the politicians who are going to get dividends from Blackstone. So that's the real connection, and that's what we try to emphasize on Colonial Outcast, that AIPAC is a distraction from the real estate lobbying groups. That's where the real money is made. So AIPAC's doing its job. It's Lee Harvey Oswald of lobbying groups. So
if we're listening to sort of your analysis there, it's like the Jewish billionaire class, so to speak, or those in positions of power, are the distraction from the real group who are controlling the agenda. You've got AIPAC as the distraction for the lobbying group around real estate. And then you have Gaza as the distraction for the removal of UNRWA in the West Bank, which is the ultimate goal. And then so you've kind of got a strategic and tactical repetition there, haven't you, across multiple different areas. Now, I don't know, and don't claim to be an expert in anything, to be honest, but just listening to that, there seems to be a familiarity and a consistency between you create the human shield or the corporate shield or the economic or political or cultural shield, and you do the real work in the background while people run around trying to save the burning house by catching the jug of water. And that's kind of like, you need to get outside the house and hose the whole fucking thing down. And I think we're on a journey to get outside that house, and that house is Zionism, and we are all victims of it. Even people in Ireland, we're victims of Zionism, because when I say Zionism, I mean American imperialism. And that's kind of where I'm at now in my sort of journey of learning and stuff. So I hope that other people can I left school without any qualifications. I didn't fucking finish school. I am interested in history through social history and art and music. And just like everybody, the majority of people out there, I don't have a fucking history degree, but it's certainly interesting when you start using YouTube and social media and non-formal education, social education, to learn about the history of the world, because there's so many truth tellers, and there has been so many truth tellers throughout history, and we just need to expose. That's why I say music is a set of doors. If you can walk people, if you can get them into the room with a good sound, and then you can walk them towards another room, that's what music is for us, and that's why we put our heart and soul into leave little messages in that single that we done for Palestine, little messages of resistance. And so
absolutely. And I'm gonna because we're wrapping up soon, I'm gonna lead this off on your song, your debut, the Shan Vans. So let's pull this up right here. 1 second. Here we go.
You might need to do another podcast to show this video, because it's 11 minutes long.
Yeah, I won't play the whole thing. I'll play maybe the first 3 minutes, Mm-hmm. Hold on. I suck at this. Come on, you fuck. This is all in Gaelic, correct?
Gaelic, there's English in it also, yeah.
Tor ha
Fucking gnarly, bro. Love that shit. I'm gonna be listening to that on the way to work again. So
lovely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
absolutely,
Yeah, it was.
brother. Hey,
It was
I could talk to you forever, man.
we could maybe do it again sometime, maybe a different focus or whatever. But I've, yeah, Mark, I really do appreciate just even giving our band even an opportunity like this. You know, it's just a candid conversation, but I mean, we're struggling. We're trying to create an identity as a band, and in an age where bands don't have identities anymore, and they're all just little corporate fuckheads, and we're trying to we're trying to do that through the Irish language, which again not a lot of people speak. And what we're doing specifically is we're going to broaden out our audience. We do singing in Irish and English, so we're going to do some songs in English, we're going to do some songs in Irish, and we're going to do bilingual songs, and that's to extend the message of Irish culture and resistance beyond sort of people who already know the Irish language, who are very much, you know, the majority of them understand resistance just through being Irish speakers in the context of a ultimate linguicide decimation of the language. So really appreciate it, and would love to do it again sometime. Sure.
Absolutely, man. And this is an honor to finally host the Irish on this show. I've been pushing for that for a while now. I'm glad we finally got it on. This is a huge bucket list. You don't understand where I've been this past year. Is I've been like, dude, we need to get the Irish on board on this program, like ASAP. So when I saw you, I DM'd you. I'm like, I hope he responds to my DM.
Yep, definitely. I appreciate that. But here, listen, there's another guy you might want to get on who is so his name's Tag Hickey. He's a satirist, journalist, comedian, blah blah blah. But he's got like something like 300,000 followers. His fucking shit is off the charts funny shit. He does sketches around like settler colonialism, where he'll use like the shed in his back garden as the place where the Palestinians got put while the Israelis moved into his house. So it's all very funny and very lighthearted, but it's totally anti-imperialism and anti-colonialism. I think there's something in that as well. I'm kind of like of that ilk. I can be both. I can be a wee bit towards like the funny stuff, but I'm also a wee bit fucking of a historical buff type fucker, and I like that balance. Whereas you know, kneecap are totally like fucking, you know, out there and trying to be provocative and trying to be short form, and then you've got Tag Hickey, I think, who's like ourselves as a band, except for he's doing it through comedy. So he's a brilliant.
Wait, is he the bald guy?
He's the bald guy. Yes. Yeah, he's that bald.
Oh, yeah. He's one of the first videos I saw way back, like last year. Yeah, I know about that.
He would be more than happy to come on this podcast. More than happy.
Oh yeah, fuck yeah. Yeah, he's fucking hilarious, dude. I loved his analogies he used. Because look, I whenever I'm arguing with the Zionists, I always use Ireland as like a metaphor. I'm like, look, I have Irish blood, and let's say I'm being, you know, let's say the Irish are being, let's say people in the United States with Irish blood are being persecuted. Can I go to Ireland and then kick an Irishman out of his house and say, hey, I used to, you know, this is ancestral territory for me? Like, no, it makes no fucking sense. And there's no way you can make what happened in Israel, in the Israelis done, any different than that analogy. Like, okay, in Gaelic history, is there a Gaelic prophecy about me coming back to the motherland of Ireland and then kicking out the native Irish who were actually living there continually for the past? So it's insane.
Well, it's just total insanity, isn't it? And it's just another representation of the fucking psychos that run the world. And if they think that that's a sustainable like way to organize society, then they'll hopefully come up against the challenge here in the next year, and specifically in the next year, just regards like what we're going to do about that, because we know the truth.
Yeah, no, we know the fucking truth, and the young people are knowing it too. Well, brother, hey, thank you for coming on. I hope I have a home. I hope I have an eternal home in Ireland.
Absolutely,
shit hits the fan. So
yeah, absolutely.
I want to take my wife and kid there. So,
well, you should, and
brother.
If you're hitting us up at all, like just give me a shout, because as I said, I do tours and stuff. I take a wee bit of a tour up West Belfast, so I'd love to take you and Greg on that tour, because it would be fucking, it would really hammer home that local message as to why we and I and people from West Belfast are so passionate about the Palestinian cause. It's because we see it as connected to the wider struggle of humanity for equality, and that's basically where we're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, fucking A, dude. Love you, Irish guys. So I hope this gets a wide Irish viewership, this particular episode, because I mean, personally, I fucking love you guys. I really do. And maybe I'm fetishizing you guys a little bit. I don't give a fuck. I can fetishize who the fuck I want. So
get behind that. I can get, as an Irishman, I can get behind that.
Hell yeah. All right, brother. Well, you have a great one, man. I can't wait to meet you in person soon. I really
Yes, Mark. We'll do it soon. Okay. And look after yourself and look after the family, and peace.
Peace out, man. God bless you guys. And you're recording now.